Okay, cool. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'd love to continue with our program for the day. I trust that you are well fed and that our concentration span is a lot better right now. I have noticed or experienced the exhibition outside, and I certainly hope that you have as well. Feel free to share your experience on social media using the hashtag Winter School 4IR. And to the people that are streaming online, if you do have any questions for our panelists or our speakers, you're welcome to also send your questions online using the hashtag Winter School 4IR. And when we do take questions, then I will pose the questions to the speakers and we will also have them answered. Right, so now we're going to introduce our next speaker. And our next speaker is actually the head of the Mining Engineering and Mine Surveying Department and is responsible for the day-to-day management of 21 staff members and 800 mining and surveying students, providing 7 qualifications to the mining industry. He is a registered professional mine surveyor and the immediate past president of the Institute of Mine Surveyors of South Africa. And with 19 years of industry experience, with 15 of which he appointed or was appointed as the responsible mine surveyor on several SA mining operations, he is currently working on mixed reality experiences and the alignment of navigation systems for underwater remotely operated mining vehicles. Here to speak to us this morning about future-proofing mining education in the fourth industrial revolution. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Professor Hendrik Krobler, who is the HOD of Mining Engineering and Mine Surveying. Please give him a round of applause.
Well, thank you. That was a really impressive, that was my whole CV. Thank you for that. So guys, yes, I'm an academic, but I'm from the mining industry, so forgive me if my presentation might not be completely academically sound, okay? And if you want to stop me at any point and ask questions, you're welcome. So this is a show and tell. I'm not trying to impress anyone with things that's highfalutin in a book. This is what we're currently doing at the moment. Okay, so some of you guys during lunchtime experience virtual reality, a little bit of mixed reality. So I'll explain to you what we are planning to do in the mining department and what we've got and what's available for your use as well. So I just need to get to the proper slides, otherwise. And I'll try and fly through it. Yeah, I've got 40 minutes, but I'm not used to talking that much. So hopefully it will be quicker than that. So I'll talk a little bit about why we're doing this. We'll talk a little bit about simulation and visualization and some of the technologies that we've got. And maybe for people who are interested, what technology is available to you, both in the common marketplace as well as what we've got on campus, and how we can maybe share that. And then the demo you've seen, but Johan and the guys from STS will be leaving in about probably half an hour or so. But I think most of you guys who's wanted to experience it has seen it. But I can just say, if they leave and you want to see it, we've got it in our lab at Doornfontein. You know, that other campus on the other side of the rugby field. Okay, so whenever you want to come and visit, give us a shout and we'll try and accommodate you. If the technology works. And Liana, once again, last week we had a bit of a mess, but it's not normal. Okay, but yeah, Murphy's Law. So one of the reasons we're looking at this is not about IR4, because that's now the sexy new term in industry. Is one of the main reasons is because our national diploma is phasing out. And with our national diploma, there's a very important bit, and that's the year that the guys spend on the mines, P1 and P2. In that time, our students actually go through a formal process on the mine. Most of them either obtain their blasting tickets or become very close to obtaining their blasting ticket, which is a certificate of competency to use explosives underground. So it's not just a play thing, it's really important for the development. But it's also, as you can understand, we're working with live explosives, so you know we have to make sure that the students actually know exactly what they're doing before we release them into industry. And then our industry, the mining industry, although we are declining, still we've got a very close cooperation with the guys, and that's probably why we've got some of the toys we do. But when our guys graduate, they want that guy to go underground tomorrow, or that lady to go underground tomorrow. There's well, there is induction in that, but they expect the guys to be able to work and actually be productive. So that's the problem. And I think that's what Arno also spoke about earlier on, is that mindset. The youth has it, and if we're not willing to change and take up challenges and actually adapt to what's happening right now, we're dead in the water. That's as simple as that. So that's the bottom line. So I won't go into that. And then competency, this is my own little idea of it, is we start with education, we put skills on top of that, and the knowledge comes from making mistakes. Knowledge comes from doing stuff physically. And hopefully, when you gain that knowledge, you're not killing people in the process, because that's, in the mining industry, our biggest concern. You can't allow guys to make a mistake that's going to put someone else's life at risk. And like some of you have seen by walking off the plank, I was worried about the amount of academics that actually wanted to jump off the building. But that's all I'll say about that. The fact is, that's how you now learn. Okay, it's safe. I can do this. Or maybe that wasn't a good idea. I just fell to my death. Okay, so that's what knowledge comes. And all of that then gives you the experience. And unfortunately, you look at anyone's job application now, a recent graduate, 5 years experience. So where's the kid with the 1 year experience or the 6 months experience? We're not looking at that. What you see on the right-hand side, there's a cartoon which I used to have on my wall in my survey office. And that was drawn somewhere in the 80s by some unknown victim. And you can see the laptop, the computer on the back, and the gadgets. That's how we saw mining engineers 20 years ago. And frankly, all of it's in here now. GPS, barometer, messaging system. How many of you guys have got smartphones here? Or some Fitbit device? Probably most people in the room. And if you don't have it on there, I bet you Mr. Apple or Mr. Samsung's telling you exactly how many steps you walk by the end of today. So 20 years ago, we didn't expect that anyone to know that. Now it's part of what we do anyway. We're collecting data without even knowing it. The skills for Industry 4, and you can read a lot on that. They're expecting people to be able to analyze data, to be critical in their thinking, to be multidisciplinary, not just to be focused on mechanical engineering or education. We have to start working together if we want to really grab onto the Industry 4. Coding, I think, is really important. Doesn't matter where you are, if you can code, you're really well away. But the big thing is adaptability. If you can't adapt to change, you're gone. It's as simple as that. So in the mining industry, you're looking at some science there. We couldn't do that with you in the environment, but in our lab, we put on the aircon. The air conditioner makes a noise. The virtual reality headset actually makes some extra noise on top of that. And just to look at the far right picture, what you're seeing there is the bottoms of two shoes. That's a surveyor surveying underground. Okay, not always. And you can see the roof and you can see the floor. So claustrophobia need not apply. Okay, that's not always on the application forms. It's not always like that, make no mistake. But you don't know where you're going to end up working tomorrow. Once again, adaptability. So we want to be able to make our students used to this before they get plunged into this without them knowing. Because it doesn't matter what advert you look at for students and bursars, it's always in a beautifully clean area, your overalls beautifully white and clean, and your hands are not dirty, and the lady's hair is made up, and there's a little bit of makeup going through, and the nails are polished. I'm sorry, that's not happening underground. It's getting there. Make no mistake, there are places where that's happening, but in reality, we're losing students after they graduate because they go into the workplace the first day and they go, this is not what I want to do. So we want to make them used to it here before they go out. So we're in a process of doing exactly this. If we want to get into Industry 4 and making people happier about what they're doing, we need to start doing it now. So I don't know how many of you guys know about the QK building on the Doornfontein campus. It used to be the Perscor building. One gentleman, thank you. So in the basement, we're actually literally building a mine. We're going to physically build a mine. So all of the toys you see outside, that's actually going to go into the mine. So instead of virtual reality, it's going to be a mixed reality environment. Because we end up things like that. Riding in a bucket, the guy with the blue hat is me. Sort of at the back there. There's about 1,500 meters below you. And we're moving at 60 kilometers an hour down the hole. Okay, I've got no problem with that because it's dark. I can't see how far I'm going to fall. But that's the sort of things we need to make students aware of. The lady in the picture there is one of my BTech students after she graduated. Okay, 45 degrees Celsius, about 90% humidity. Not a pleasant place to be in if you don't know what it's about. She's about 3,000 meters underground in that photograph. Okay. Then there's things like this, mine accident. I'm not going to go into the detail here, but something happened to the roof and the explosives, and that's what happened. So that's how we would normally show our kids, this is what happened. There's the vehicle. This is actually a map, a 2D map. But how much better if we can actually show it physically, and I hope this will run. Now, I'm not naming names because this is a physical environment, but you can see how we're walking down the tunnel. If you've done grade 10 maths, you know about Cartesian scales, X, Y's, and Z's, right? So what you're looking at here, every single pixel is actually an X, Y, and Z point. It's a measurable physical point that can be measured. It's not a photograph. Every single one of those points or point cloud points are measurable. So I can stop at any stage and measure anything I'm looking at here. Okay, so the color that gets added is added afterwards from a laser scanner. But that just gives you an idea. So what you see, the red and white there, that's where the guys would drill holes and blast. Unfortunately, the guy here got injured in some way, but this is from a laser scan. And that's some of the technology that I want to show you. But now what they've done here is we've scanned it, and you can actually go and show the guys, this is what happened here. And you've never been underground, but if I now start explaining what happened here, you'll have a far better idea than a simple 2D picture, which is the normal way. Okay, hopefully I can jump through. The next thing we've got in our lab is a virtual reality blast wall. So we don't have a screen, but like the screen at the back of the room there. It's a physical white screen where the mouse, which they use, looks like a paint can. So they can physically go and mark off the holes, put explosives in the holes virtually, thank heavens. I don't know, exams department doesn't want me to blast during exam times. I don't know why that is, but okay. So they can put virtual explosives in the hole, time it, and then blast it. And the little bottom photograph you see there is from one of the videos where the guys can actually see how the rocks start breaking as a result of the explosives. So Johan, this is also from your guys. That's the next step now, virtual reality in a physical environment underground. So this mine specifically would now take their new staff members underground in the mine in a safe environment and let them do virtual reality there. So although they're in a working place, they're still safe, it's still controlled, we can still deal with them. And that's what we're planning to do here. So some of you guys did this earlier on, and it was a ball to see how people, you're standing on the floor. And I'm looking at people, I'm not picking out, I do exactly the same. I'm standing on a floor, but the moment I've got the headset on and I press the button in the elevator, and it opens over whatever that cityscape is, and there's birds flying underneath me, I'm not a happy camper, I'm not happy. As I say, most of you guys jumped off, which really worries me, but okay. So that's virtual reality for you. So in our environment, what the guys can do for us is they can put checklists in place that the student has to complete. We can actually mark them. And, well, we're standing next to them, so his friends can see what he's doing right or messing up on the screen right next to him. So we understand why he's freaking out, but in a controlled environment. So that's what you see at the bottom. So the guys can do all sorts of funny things. And some of the places, if they walk past the hazard that they were supposed to pick up, the hazard can virtually kill them. So the rocks fall on them or something happens, explosion, whatever. So that makes it quite realistic, and that now comes to the experience because, well, you're not going to do that same thing the next time. And maybe there's a good mix of younger generation. I'm not there, but if you realize you can spawn in the game and you can do it again, you learn, right? Next time you're not going to go around this side and make sure the dragon jumps on you or whatever the hell the thing is. I don't play games like that, so, but the younger generation, that's how they learn. And that is what this whole presentation is about. So we've got the toys, we can work with it. But if you're in the educational side or you want to try something, we've got it that we can test it. And there's ample place for research. To quote you, I mean, it's coming out of our gills, potential for research. And that's what I'm hoping that we can do. Okay, so that's, you'll also see Sibanye, so that's the two main companies that's sponsoring us for this. So STS3D are the guys doing the training for us and the environment, and Sibanye is funding it. But yes, everyone, the last time I presented this, the guys were saying, yeah, but you don't have to spend so much money on it. And I agree. I mean, an Oculus set is, I'm looking now at 10 grand, Johan, I'm looking at you, 3 grand, 30 grand, sorry, yeah, the Oculus Quest, yeah. Okay, so say 10,000 rand, but that's for one set. This will not give you exactly the same environment. This is made from cardboard. If you go onto the internet, you can actually get the plan and make one yourself. I paid a whole 100 rand for this at Gadget Shop, and that's expensive. It's got 2 lenses in. You open it up, you put your phone in. I'm sure most of you guys have done this. Put your phone in, download an AR, and there you go. You're in the mine, or you're underground, or you're in an aquarium, or whatever. Even this is getting old. I showed some of the guys earlier on. There's something called Anatomy 4D. So I take my phone, and I can show anyone that's interested afterwards. You scan the floor, and you say, I want the guy to stand there in the room. And you can bring the guy up. He will stand in front of you. You can take his skull out. You can put it somewhere, and you can put the brain in another place, and the lungs, and it's free. It's all free. So there's a lot of these things going. So that's the cardboard I was showing you. For this, I need to go out, but hopefully I can do this without messing up. This is also a mine, underground. Forgive me for doing this, but I just need to copy this link. So this is on the internet. This is free. I just want to show you what's possible. And yes, it's a mine, but it could just as well have been an operating theater or a bottling plant or a whatever. Okay, so this is Tankerstown. It's a tin mine. Actually, it's a copper mine. So the blue stuff you see on the side, that's copper sulfate. That's actually where the copper has oxidized. Okay, so if I click on any of those stars, it'll take me there. I can, oops, sorry, you do get seasick sometimes, but you can look around in the mine. That's called a boxhole, one of my favorite things in life. If I can just get back there again. That's in the roof. So someone had to climb up there to mine that. No chains, no beautiful hard hats and all sorts of wonderful things. The guys climbed up those planks to actually mine there. Hardcore stuff. Okay, so I'm just going to go to another portion and then I'll go out. I don't want to bore you. So that's some of the technology that the guys use to scan it with. But there it is. It's full 3-dimensional. Board surveyor taking a photograph of himself. But you can experience the entire mine. Now you can give this to a student on Blackboard. And in fact, this is one of the things we do give our students, just to go and stuff around with, to actually walk around the mine. You've never been in the mine, but here we go. And that's just on a computer screen. This can also be done in the VR goggles. Okay, so I'm going to go out of that for now. Just go back to my slideshow. Sorry about this. There we go. So I grew up in that generation where my mom used to kill me for sitting too close to the television. Well then, I mean, it was a box this big with a huge radioactive cell, and, you know, nowadays everyone's attached to their cell phones 99% of the time. So that's all great. That's beautiful new technology, right? It's already too late. They say if you buy a computer, it's already out of date now, 3 months later. So that's the new generation. That's called a HoloLens. So that's a completely standalone computer that you wear on your head. Now, it's still a little bit big. I wouldn't be walking with this in the street, let's put it that way. But it gives you full access to Google or internet. You can use Word, Excel, whatever you want, just by gestures. It really looks not well. It's even worse than the virtual reality thing because you're standing there pinching stuff and moving stuff around. But you can literally then have the cricket on the one side, if you're that way inclined, and actually be working on an Excel spreadsheet here. But on top of that, we can now do holographic images. So you're in the room, but on the table, you can have a mine. It exists, that's done. So you can literally pull a truck from the mine, look at the truck, look at the performance of that truck, put it back down. That's definitely the way. So that's what you're seeing on your left-hand side there. Once again, the price was ridiculous. Newer versions, cheaper, 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 cheaper. So maybe that's one of the questions. In 10 years' time, this will be standard. We'll all be sitting with glasses with big bug eyes, and the presenter will think everybody's listening to him, but meanwhile they're watching cricket and doing something else, playing a game. But that's where mixed reality is going to. Something I didn't speak about, also with the sensors you saw outside, there's 2 sensors that gave you that virtual reality experience if you tried it. If I understand it correctly, with the new sensors, you can have a group of people in the same room in the virtual environment. So you can now have 10 or 12 students actually interacting in a virtual environment while standing on the floor. And probably that's where we're going to, because if I look at the new generation, what I deal with, it seems like you're far more comfortable having a WhatsApp conversation than actually talking to each other over a meal. That's just the feeling I get. So maybe that's the next generation now. We'll go back to having proper conversations, but in a virtual world. I don't know. I'm making a joke about that, but we don't know where that's going to go to. So this is what we're planning to have at DFC. Where does the real stop and the virtual reality starts? Because the first bit you see there is a real tunnel, and the middle bit is a screen projection. Okay, where the guys can go and mark off and do whatever they need to do. So that now becomes a mixed reality environment. Okay, so I'm not going to do the demo. I'm going to jump through this, but there's a whole video on what the guys from STS is doing, because I've only touched on a little bit of what they're doing for us. But that's why I say, afterwards, you guys are welcome to contact me and we can see how we can develop it. So what I'm looking at here is some of the technology that's available. Top right-hand corner is a laser scanner we've got. A laser scanner basically sends out a laser beam, and it takes between 1 million and 2 million points, measurements, per second. Per second, right? So if I scan something like this room, it might take me half an hour to get it all measured up, but within that half an hour, I could generate up to 40 million points, or a couple of gigabytes worth of data. But what that would mean is I would be able to see each of you guys, you'd be able to recognize yourself, but now I can start doing measurements on you. Or let's do it less personal, we can measure how far the lights are apart, or how high the ceiling is. Now in a student environment, once again, now we don't have to take them in there if it's dangerous. We can have it in a virtual world where they can do it safely. So then on the left-hand side is a thing called Leica BLK. It's literally, it's smaller than a 2-liter Coke bottle. Does exactly the same job. So within 3 years, from the large scanner that weighs 20 kilograms to something that weighs 4 kilograms. The lady at the bottom, you can't really see the photograph very well, but she's walking with something in her hand that's literally this size. That's once again, 2 years later, an iteration on those 2 top scanners. So the handheld scanner will give you 2 million points a second, okay, and it will do a full color capture as you walk. So I don't have to put points into Survey or whatever, you can literally walk and pick up the room when it's done. the same speed as you walked. And it's linked to your laptop or your iPad. So by the time you walk out the room, the job's done. Goodbye. Okay, and then the thing in your hand there is not a baseball. That's called a Fly 360. It's about $9,000 on Amazon. It does a full 360-degree video. Okay, so what does that mean? Let me go show you. So I thought of a bunch of different videos, and well, you know, YouTube, if you click on the wrong thing, you maybe don't get exactly what you expected. But I thought because we're in South Africa, we'll do a safari, right? So here's the video. Right, boring, eh? Just bush. But I can look around. I can look around at what the person behind me is doing. And they're bored. Okay, so there's some buffalo. Okay, most of you guys are aware of buffalo. But can you see what I'm doing? I can look around, and there's some information on the Cape buffalo. Okay, I can look at what's happening in the truck behind me because there's some bored tourists. Okay, and this is with a 8,000 Rand camera, and it's on your cell phone. So once again, you want to show a student something? There we go. I mean, where do you want to look? There's an elephant being very close to the guide there. Okay, fine, maybe. I was away hiking the weekend past, and I climbed up a chain ladder, and my courage left me halfway up. And looking down, my daughter was videoing this. Why? No, just in case you fall off, Dad. So maybe that was what was happening there as well. But the fact is, yeah, there's it. And it's the size, let's go back here, of a tennis ball. And the next iteration on that is a helmet with just a little pimple on the top. So you can literally walk with a helmet, and wherever you walk, it's done. And you control it from your cell phone. So selfies to a whole new level, completely. But the fact is, that's how we can gather data to put into virtual reality. And of course, that's the gap, is we can capture the data, and someone has to really do a lot of work on it to actually get it into the virtual reality environment. But these videos, for most people, that's not been on a mine, has not been to an operating theater. The last workshop we had, someone was talking about going to a slaughterhouse for the kids who's doing, I don't know, food technology or something it was. Okay, that's not really, but you know, at least they could see what's happening, but it was a 360 photograph, it wasn't a video. So that's what's available now. This tech is not that expensive. We've got the laser scanners because we measure stuff, okay? But the camera, I've actually gone to the point now, I said, no, why do all of this? Why spend R1 million on a scanner when I can spend 8,000 Rand on a camera? Yes, our budgets are, and I hope this doesn't go too far, internet-wise, but our budgets aren't big at university, right? But $8,000 for education, really? It's not that much. And it's 4K live footage. I think you can do 40 minutes. If you want to bore a student for 40 minutes, they'll start looking at the roof and pigeons. Yes?
That camera isn't measuring.
No, it's just capturing an image, yeah. That's an image. So what you're seeing here is one of the things we're working on. That's a marine mining vessel in dry dock in Cape Town. We can actually measure that, and what you see in the corner here is a point cloud of some of the equipment on there. So that's a Google Earth image, obviously, that you're seeing on the right-hand side. The smaller bit is a point cloud. So although it looks like a photograph, it's not. It's actual points which you can measure to. So if you need to get physical dimensions, and then of course it comes back to Arno. If I've got a point cloud, I can build a wireframe, and if I've got a wireframe, I can print it. So now all of a sudden, if I've looked at something once, I can do a 3D print. Okay, so that's what the scanner sees. That's the bearded old fellow there is me, looking at the machine doing its work, because that's what we're getting to now. But that's the photograph, a 360-degree photograph that then gets draped onto the point cloud to do stuff. Okay, so yes, the scanners we've got, we can measure with, physically measure with, take measurements and actually do something. I have seen stuff 2 weeks ago in the US. where you can take your phone, take a normal video, and generate that into a 3D point. So if I walk around you and you stand still long enough, I can make a 3D print from you. So that's, the technology is there. Okay, there's some frightening stuff out there. I literally said to someone, this Terminator movies we saw when we were kids and that's coming out again, it ain't that far away. I'm not talking about the robots, but the rest of it, definitely. And what I wanted to add to what Arno was saying, if we don't adapt, there'll still be jobs for people who don't adapt, but what they'll be doing is changing batteries on robots and on technology, because that's what will remain. So just to show you, top right-hand corner is a sculpture of Nike. I don't know if that's the right word to use. She's standing in Fada. I don't know why the guys don't market that much. I'm looking to my newly met colleague there, because the original stands in the Louvre. She's 3,000 years old, okay? How she looks now is not how they picked her up. They picked her up in little bits, and they found her hand last year. Okay, so that statue hasn't got it on, because at some stage the Louvre made 20 or 40 plaster casts of the original and sent it all over the world. One ended up here. I don't know the history. I don't know how it got here. I scanned it because I was looking at cracks in the roof and cracks in the floor. Completely different reason. Okay, I'm a miner. A female in a dress. Let's scan her. Okay, so we scanned her. But what I can do now, the Louvre Nike has also been scanned. So they can email her to me, and we can compare how accurate the two casts were. Or I can print her. And the detail on this is amazing. You can barely see it on the photograph, but I can zoom in so close that you can see how the sculpture in that stage, the dress is wet and it sticks to her legs. And you can literally see or measure the texture of the dress versus the rest of the skin on the statue. That's possible. Okay, at the bottom, that was another one. We were scanning something else, and this steam train rocked up. So we scanned the guy's steam train for him. Okay, it took us 15 minutes. It was done. What I'm saying is we've got the toys. We've got some toys in our department. We've been very fortunate that the mining industry really supports us. And if you wonder where you get support, speak to whoever your industry is. The guys have to help the university. They get extra points for it. Just ask. It's as simple as that. But if you want us to capture something, I want to show this, but I'm a little bit loath. So last time I did this at the workshop, I said exactly that. Anyone that wants to see something, you're welcome. 100 people in the venue. One person came back from law. Okay? So I thought forensics and we're going to scan a car accident, and there's some awesome stuff you can do with laser scanning. No, we just want to scan a court so we can put a virtual accused and a virtual advocate and a virtual judge in there. So we went and scanned it. So what you're looking at now, you can see it sort of looks weird, so I'll do the 360. Once again, it's not a photograph, it's not a video, this is measurable points. It's actually a cloud, a very dense cloud of points of the High Court in Pretoria. We went and scanned it one morning at 7. Walked in, scanned, before the court started, we were gone. So you can see from the judge's chair how this looks. You can see where the accused stands, you can see where the advocate sits. And you can now walk around it, and you can look at the ceiling or whatever else you want to do. So if you look at the ceiling, you can start seeing it's points, it's not a photograph. And if we wanted to, and I'm not sure what Dalian wants to do with this yet, I haven't even shown Dalian this yet. We can even print this now, so that you can tell the guys, you're going to sit there and you're going to walk there. We scanned another court similar to where the Oscar case happened. So literally you can show the guy's going to come out from there, walk up the stairs, walk in here, that's where he's going to sit. So it's not far-fetched, it's not pipe dreams. We've got the technology to do it. And the audience's imagination is the limit. and we're willing to help where we can, as long as we can do some research out of it. Let's be honest about it. That's what it's about. And obviously, if it benefits the students, great. So that's one thing. That's another one we want to try. That's old technology. That's a good 7, 8 years old technology, doing sound paintings. Where I walked this weekend, we wanted to go and look at sound paintings, and it was completely defaced. Graffiti over everything and whatever. My theory is if we scan that, we'll be able to actually take the graffiti off and see what the original looked like. Because a lot of these things, there are actual, whether or not it's by erosion or whether or not the original artist did it, there'd actually be an indentation. So you'd be able to actually see what's behind the rock, if I can put it that way, what the guy intended with it. So that's where I'm going to leave you. Okay. It was supposed to be that. So either we jump and we make it part of what we want to do, or we're going to just change batteries on robots. It's up to you. Bottom line is that the robots, she's coming. We can either build them or we can run away from them. I'm open to any questions, and if you're too shy to ask now, or there's anyone else that's interested, you're welcome to come and have a look at the VR in our department. We can show you some extra things. This is just bottom line. Yes, ma'am.
Upon the problem that they cannot have now, why they couldn't identify those ladies who are stuck? We do have this technology that can.
When you say still stuck at a specific place?
I think it's Caroline Mining in Mpumalanga, yeah.
Mpumalanga. Oh, the Zamazamas, if I can call it that.
No, not the Zamazamas. They were working in
Yeah,
the
they
coal
were
mine,
underground,
yes.
yeah. So look,
Yeah.
there's tech that works for it. The laser scanner, you need to be able to see what's happening. So there's seismic tools that you can pick up a void, okay? But yes, there are technology available. Sometimes the cost is just too much, but I don't think in that case we'll be able to put a laser scanner up and find them. But what you can do is you can map the area and actually inform the rescue teams, use this, use that. And we are working with the guys on that, but things are still being developed. And of course, another thing which, as a whole story, is that laser scanner that we use is not sealed. So if we take that into the mine, because it's electricity, it can actually cause a secondary explosion. So, there's all sorts of things that you have to, but if they built the thing beforehand, all three-dimensional, a good success story is the guys in Chile. I don't know if you remember that, about 7 years ago, where the people got trapped, I think, 1,000 meters underground, because they had the maps and they had the three-dimensional model. And that's what I do, that's what mine surveyors do. We could actually design a borehole to get to those people and rescue them. But if it's not there, or it's an old site, what we call Madala sites, then it wouldn't be mapped in that way. It will just be a piece of paper. And then it's not possible. But that's exactly why we're doing this research. That's why we're being funded to do it, to see how we can improve what we're doing. I don't know if that answers your question. It's a difficult one. I don't want to go into too much detail because I don't understand exactly what it's all about. But look, I've been in rescue situations, and sometimes you have to send team after team after team to find someone, and it's a false lead. And then they're in a completely different place from where you expected them to be. We've had that. I can talk out of experience as far as that's concerned. So I'm not quite sure, but yeah. Look, seismics are getting there. I looked at something that's called ground penetrating radar, where the thing looks like a lawnmower. Minor, it looks like a lawnmower to me. But if you walk with it, it sends radar into the ground, and it picks up structures, but only about 10 meters deep. And once again, on your iPhone, you can then look through the ground and see those sewage pipe running, and there's a gas pipe. But that's shallow, that's 10 meters. But one of the things we're doing just up the road here at CSIR, the mining research unit, is exactly that, seeing into the rock, finding different ways of looking. But that's what people forget. Mining, at the end of the day, Even though it's robots, it's the same as it was 2,000 years ago. At the end of the day, there's a lot of rocks above your head. It's not that easy to find you. Any other questions? Anything? Yes, okay.
Quickly, just looking at this, looking at VR and moving into the future, uh, might we be looking at an open source situation where for collaboration with other universities, specifically the Witwatersrand, because I know they have a mining facilities, and looking at maybe the Northwest, taking into consideration from a geographical point of view in terms of um, mines that are not taken to.
So, especially as far as WITS and UP and UNISA is concerned, the four mining universities, we definitely have that agreement. So, I won't say it's open source in the fact that but we share and we definitely collaborate openly. And I'll say it again, like I said at the previous workshop, I'm the third child. I was taught to live with hand-me-downs and share my toys, okay? So, the toys we've got is not for mining and nobody else can use it. If we can share, obviously not just for playing around with, but if we can get something and we can share it, great. So I met with guys from Colorado School of Mines in the US and in Germany, Freiburg University. Europe has got a big drive for virtual reality in education. And once again, they're mining as few as there are, but their mining faculties or mining departments are working together now and sharing data. But that's in Europe. So yeah, we are isolated in Africa, but we're really trying to reach out and do this because we've got the experiences which those kids don't see. So I'm saying, okay, cool, we'll scan it if you help us build it. You know, so that's where we are at the moment. But if we don't share, we're gone. And in the new world, that's it. IP obviously is a big issue, and I can't talk about that. My personal opinion is, if it's for education, we should share it. What is that student going to do with it? Build a new mind? No. But he's going to learn something.
Another technical question. I see there with your presentation, there's a lot of VR, meaning there's a lot of OPG files. How long does one scan under the mine actually take? Because I mean, to stitch that kind of animation.
Forgive me for smiling, but once again, and I won't mention too much of that, but the scan takes me 4 minutes. That's it. And if I put a light on and I take full color HD photographs, it'll take me 6 minutes per scan. The problem is exactly that, the stitching and the working with data. And I'm sorry, we can't have people saying, but no, you should be okay with a 2 gigabyte RAM laptop. You know, we need to understand that if we're serious about Industry 4, we have to be serious about hardware. And the hardware we've got is absolutely insufficient to deal with it. One piece of mine, if we scan, say, 200 meters of tunnel, is 40 gigabytes of data. Now try and run that through a 2 RAM processor. It's not going to work. Please don't get me wrong, I'm not criticizing, but I'm saying we should really have a serious rethink about hardware. Because the software is light years ahead of where we are with hardware. I looked at the thing last night. I want to say it's in the Popular Mechanics. It's not DreamWorks. DreamWorks, the animation people that did How to Train Your Dragon and all of that. The last movie, they were saying in the first How to Train Your Dragon, I don't know if you've seen it. If you've got kids, you've seen it a million times, I promise you. In the first one, they had 60 dragons. In the second movie, they had 1,000 dragons. In this movie, I had 60,000 dragons because of the processing power. But those animators work with a 124 gigabyte RAM processor. So just the processor is 124 gigs. Now, obviously, that's not what we need here. 16 would be fine. But what we've got, so it takes me 4 hours in a shift to do the job, and it takes me a week to process. And literally, even with this, which is a 16 gig RAM, I shouldn't have said that, should I? It's mine. Okay, it's my own. Okay, 16 gigs of RAM. I load it. I go and make coffee. I come back. I click OK. Go and watch something on the television. I click OK. And then I leave it for the night. I literally leave it for the night. Tomorrow morning, it either said error at 1 o'clock in the morning because I'm Murphy, or it's done it. And that's with 16 gigs of RAM. So we really need to look at processing power and storage. Because I've got 7 projects on here. My hard drive's full. So anyway, anyone else?
All right. No, yeah, I'm happy to know about this new technology, but to come to mischievous mind, because of of mapping before you blast.
Yeah.
So if I gain knowledge about doing this, I can identify maybe the safe that my neighbor could hide his money and use it to identify where is it all.
Of course, and that's the problem. With a lot of these things, mining companies are saying, I don't want to share my data because you will know where it's from. I showed you a video. I can't tell you where it's from, but if you're from that area, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And that's fortunate and unfortunate, okay? Because exactly that. Now someone can say, no, but I can spy on what you're doing. Yes. But if we're in an education environment, the guys need to understand, man, what's a student going to do with it? It's for education. But obviously, in the dog-eat-dog world, it could be. But once again, the way you blast, no. I mean, we're sharing practices. I think the word is best practice. So I'd rather show someone, this is how I've done it, what can I learn from you? And hopefully you'll teach me. But the moment we say, yeah, that guy, oh, what? You're putting someone else's life at risk, isn't it? Rather than sharing it. And that's my worry. So as far as practices are concerned, the mines definitely cooperate and collaborate. But the moment you start getting to rands and cents and geology and that, yeah, you can understand because your neighbor might be on a far better mine or a far worse mine. And now I want to either buy the mine or I want to sell my mine to you, you know, so then you don't want to give away all your secrets. But look, I get to places and people tell me, oh, you're allowed to look, but you're not allowed to make notes. Literally, I'm not allowed to take a piece of paper and a pen with me, but I can scan. So, okay, so what's the difference now? So I'm scanning for you, but I can't make notes. I don't need notes, dude. Making a joke here, okay, but that's unfortunately the thing. Cell phones, okay, now you ban cell phones underground. I listened to something on the radio this morning where the guys were saying some employers are now looking at banning cell phones from work. So when you clock in the morning, you put your cell phone in a box and that's it for the day. I won't work there. What if my wife needs me? But okay, once again, now I can walk around the new BMW and it happens anyway, doesn't it? What's that story with that chef, not Ramsey, the other guy? A couple of years ago, he published his book and he sent it to the wrong email address. So the book was ready, he was supposed to email it to the publisher and it rocked up at some other guy's email address. So everybody had the cookbook before it was even printed. I mean, it happens, okay? So that's where IP now really becomes dodge. I don't know, I'm rambling on. Sorry.
So my question is related to the offer that you've been making of collaborating with people.
Cool.
You've spoken of 2 bits of technology, if I understand you correctly. The one is the virtual reality part of it.
Yep.
And the other one is the scanner ability that you
That's
have
correct, yeah.
to convert things into point maps and you know,
And
virtual reality usable.
Walkthroughs and videos. So that video you saw a little bit earlier on, that we can
Yes.
generate, definitely.
Okay, so I just want to get clarity on that for you
Yeah,
guys'
yeah.
purposes. So if people are interested in creating virtual reality environments through scanning them,
We can do the scanning.
yes.
The virtual reality is the
No, I
chaps
get that,
we had
but I
outside,
mean the
but-
scanning is
but we
for
can
many
scan.
people the place where they don't even know where to go next because how do I
As a
get
start.
this converted
start,
into an image that could be used potentially for virtual reality? So you're offering that.
We definitely.
But are you also offering access to your virtual reality environment
Yeah.
for people to come and then
And
Okay,
experience it. Look, at the moment, that's why I'm leaning heavily on Johan, because the guys know the system really well.
Yes.
For the first time in 6 months, we actually had a problem last week when we had a group of schoolgirls there.
Yes.
Murphy's Law, it worked perfectly. The first kid puts on the goggles, black screen. Okay, but my lab tech still needs to be really trained on it so that we can do it. And the same with laser scanning. You want laser scanning done?
Okay.
Mina.
But so
But it's there. It's open.
just give us,
it's available.
from somebody who's done it then, just give us a step by step. So once you've scanned, let's say we've scanned this venue, and
Okay,
next year we don't want to have the talk done actually by real people. We want to do a really virtual reality winter school. So now we've scanned the venue, you've done the scan.
We've
for us.
scanned the
Just
venue,
give us
right.
the steps to get to virtual reality in short.
I'm really looking for a lifeline from Arno now. Okay, but the laser scan is the first bit. So now we've got the environment. What needs to be done now is everything needs to be linked together so that we can build the room. Now, I know Arno, that I know for a fact from the last workshop, they do green screen. So they've got a green screen where they can film guys. So once they've green screened that, there should be a way of then putting that person into the environment. And I think, in a sense, what I'm getting more and more to is we shouldn't be doing it with a laser scanner. We should be doing it with the 360 fly. Because then you can actually video the person as it is. Because with the laser scanner, it's like in the old days, you know, when the guy still had to gooi the thing over his head and take the photograph, and everyone stood like this for 5 minutes. With the laser scanner, you have to do that because it scans, and if you move, you've got this ghost. Because the laser scanner is actually made to ignore people. Anything that moves, it'll just throw out. So I think the best is we can scan or photograph it, and then somewhere between ourselves and Arno, you'll have to do the green screen bit. And then I do know that they've got production companies that, and then if not, I think Johan and them are the guys that we can talk to. Because they are doing it physically for the mining industry as we speak. And I tell you, if we think we're ahead, Zambia is ahead of us. I'll tell you that right now. There's more of this tech working in Zambia at the moment than there are here. So we can, it's a learning process, and we have to learn with you, because every time there's something new that comes up. Now there's an animator that we couldn't get access to last week, or whatever, you know. Same with CAD 3D. Literally, the new AutoCAD has a function where if you've got Oculus Rift, you can plug your AutoCAD in, and you can have the student look at his model that is just designed. But that's engineering. What I'm saying is you can do this in a hospital. You can do this with a, well, I think the medical guys are also way ahead of us with cadavers and all of that sort of stuff. But you can do, if you can see it and you can picture it, we can measure it for you, and you can probably build something out of it. Remember, I are still just a miner. So for me, I want to be able to measure the thing and build a pretty picture, and I'm happy. This animation thing for us is brand new. But you guys are welcome to come and visit the lab. If you've got something, we want to scan a baobab tree. We want to scan sand paintings. We want to scan whatever. Let's try it. Yeah, so it's an open invitation. You guys have got my number. If it's not on there, I'll quickly, let's someone just do this. If it's going to work, of course. So that's my email address. Is that legible enough? And yeah, I'm as willing to learn as the next guy. What we can't do is you can't tell me, oh, we want a virtual reality thing for, and I'm picking on no one in particular, biochemistry, and we need it next week. I can't do that. You'll have to help me. Then we can do it, great. You know, but I can't scan molecules. But we can build a thing out of fiberglass or whatever and then scan it. That can be. Okay. I don't know if that answers you, Andre, but and I'm open to it. I mean, we're all in the same boat. I think we have to really step up. But if you've got the imagination, it can be done. There's someone out there that can do it for you. We've got good links. We've got support from the mining industry. We've got STS's support. We've got support from Hexagon, which owns Leica. And the stuff they're doing are incredible. I looked at the thing last week. In a conference venue, there's 5,000 people. The scanner sits on the roof. It looks like a security camera. So it was live feed. The guy put his briefcase down and he walked away from it. So it picked up the briefcase and the guy, and it followed the guy through the room. And the guy went, oh, laptop, go. And he went, oh, laptop was found? Okay, fine, let's forget about that. What's the next problem? It's cyber done. It's freaking amazing what can be done. And what I found from industry is if you go to the guys and say, listen, I know you guys are doing this. How's about helping us at the varsity? I've yet to hear someone say no. It's just a matter of asking. Cool. I hope that was worth it. I don't know. If you have got any questions, you're welcome. Unfortunately, the plank's gone now. But we can do a mixed reality one. We can put a real plank on the roof. Okay, so it's still available if you guys want to try it. If you haven't tried it, I think you should, because I can tell you about this for hours on end until you've tried it. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Thank you. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Cool. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Thank you, Professor Grobler. All right, there we go. So earlier on, we actually had a question from a gentleman that was wondering about the accessibility of resources in the fourth industrial revolution in the poorer communities. And our next speaker is actually going to help us unpack that. And our next speaker is actually a lecturer in the Department of Emergency Medical Care and is acutely aware of the challenges that face both students and institutions. So cost does not always equate to equality, and he's quite passionate about finding innovative ways to improve the education experience for students in the fourth industrial revolution. So he is going to speak to us more about the fourth industrial revolution and how it does not need to only be resources or accessible for rich students. Our speaker right now is Mr. Andrew Makink, who is a lecturer. Please give him a round of applause.
No, it's fine. I'm cool, thanks. Yes, thanks.
Cool, man. You need to talk, bro.
Yeah, I'm actually a mine surveyor by trade. A long time.
So then we must talk.
Yeah. Afternoon, everyone. There's advantages and disadvantages to presenting after lunch. The first thing is everyone's quite happy because their stomachs are full. And the problem is their stomachs are full, so their eyes start closing. So I'm going to try and be exciting, but I don't know. But fortunately today there have been some very good presentations, so I'm going to piggyback on them a little bit. I'm actually a paramedic by trade, although I did start my career as a mine surveyor. Strange that the mine surveyors would talk before me, but... So I want you to just imagine something. You're working a Friday night, so average Friday nights in Joburg on an emergency response vehicle. So we drive around in vehicle. We're the guys with the little red lights on who peep and flash our lights and do our thing. And you dispatch to a multiple shooting in an informal settlement. Okay, that's kind of the information we get. It's raining, it's cold, and it's dark. That's what happens at night. It rains and it's cold and it's dark. You've got an academic colleague with you, and you've got two students. They work with you on the vehicle, and it's actually quite nice because normally paramedics work alone. So advanced life support, we work alone. One person, one car, and we go to these horrible places. So it's quite nice not to be alone. When you arrive there, it's the lower part of the CBD, and again, quite nice, the police are already there. They're quite helpful when there's been a shooting. Quite relieved. So as you direct, the police take you through, and you walk past the dead dog. It looks like the dog's been shot, and there's blood on the ground. It looks reasonably fresh blood. You walk there, if most of you have been in a Zama type informal settlement, the corridors between the venues are very small, it's very dark. The only thing you have is your little headlamp, which guides you through the darkness. Kind of the right kind of place for an ambush, especially considering that a whole bunch of people have been shot. You arrive at the scene and there are 8 people who've been shot. Patients are all over the place, and you try and move them out of the rain into the shacks. And when you ask where the shooters are, no one really seems to know. The guys with the guns, no one knows who they are, no one knows where they are. They say that it was a Zama turf war. We know about what's been happening in the Zamas nowadays, the illegal miners. They like to get involved in shooting each other when they get onto each other's turf. And you start treating the patients. You have very limited resources. We're usually not equipped to deal with 8 gunshot patients. And just to make your life better, there are no ambulances. I think we're all quite well aware of the challenges from a resource perspective that the city of Johannesburg has. And the community has an expectation because the politicians like to tell them that when you call for an ambulance, it's going to come quickly. So the community now starts asking you where the ambulances are. Starts to get a little bit tense, and this really big policeman with a big bulletproof vest and a big automatic weapon comes to you and says, "Sir, we need to leave now." You have a choice. If you decide to leave, the community are probably going to get a little bit unhappy and become violent. If you stay, what happens if the shooters come back? So take a couple of seconds to just consider the scenario that I've given you and decide. Do you stay or do you go? But wait 1 second, this is not a game. You can't try, and if it doesn't work, go back to the beginning of the stage, respawn, start again. There's no second option. If you get it wrong, it could be the last thing you do. Are you scared? Are you worried about the people that you're with? Can you smell the blood? Can you smell the alcohol? Can you smell the fear? Do you think you might die? Well, probably not, because we're inside the auditorium. We're here. There's no danger. We are in Joburg, but there are no gun-wielding illegal miners running around. Well, I hope not. There's no policeman with a big gun. I can tell you this, though. When I was there, I was scared. I was scared for my colleague who has 3 children. I was scared for the students who are my responsibility. I was scared for the other people who had not yet been shot, and I was scared for the people who had been shot because there were no ambulances. It doesn't matter how good I am at describing a scene to you. If you were not there, you don't know what it was like. And I'm glad we had the thing about virtual reality before, because it's really important. Because when you are there in a video, it's still not real life. I want to quote the man after whom this auditorium was named, the late great Chinua Achebe, who said, "A man who calls his kinsmen to a feast does not do so to save them from starving. They all have food in their homes. When we gather together in the moonlight village ground, it is not because of the moon. Every man can see it in his own compound. We come together because it is good for kinsmen to do so." And I think this is important. And what the previous speaker was saying about coming together is exactly this. We all have the moon. We just don't see it from other people's perspectives. In today's context, the moon is the 4th industrial revolution, and every single person here has a different viewpoint on what that means. And unless we start sharing these kind of ideas and start talking about how we can do things, we're never going to go anywhere. I mean, all the stuff I've seen today has got me thinking, I hope I can actually do my talk, because I want to go home and start contacting people to come and scan stuff for me. But we have to also just be cognizant of the difference between the 3rd and the 4th industrial revolutions, because this is actually very important. The 3rd revolution was the digital revolution, and we all got excited about a whole lot of stuff. But the 4th, which is growing out of the 3rd, is categorized by this explosive development that humankind has never seen before. I'll give you an example. 50 years ago, which I wasn't a kid then, but even when I was a kid, which wasn't that long ago, I've just seen a lot of sun. What were dragons? Dragons were these things that were in kids' coloring books. They were these things in folklore. They were like the stuff of legends. Then we had this movie called How to Train Your Dragon. And all of a sudden, dragons were these cute things that sort of burped fire, and it was really cool. And CGI gave us these amazing things. And today, this is what we have today. Those of you who watch Game of Thrones will realize this is Jon Snow, and that's Drogon, the big fire-breathing dragon. That dragon looks real. If you've watched Game of Thrones, that dragon sounds real. Today, we believe in dragons. We believe in them. We believe that this thing exists, that it blows out fire. Go and speak to a Game of Thrones fan and tell them that dragons don't exist. It's dangerous. It's very dangerous. So they're not cute little fire-burping dragons anymore. They're these big, scaly, monstrous things that we used to be scared of when we were kids. What of Jon Snow when he reaches out and strokes the dragon? What do you think he sees? You ever think that he sees something different to what we do? He sees a green screen. He touches air. There's no dragon there. He's standing in front of a green screen on a carpet doing this. But we believe the dragon is there, but he doesn't. And sometimes this is the challenge that we have. We believe in dragons, sort of. They don't fly over Joburg, probably too scared. But we believe in them, but the guy who made us believe in them does not believe in dragons. We believe in a dragon that he created. So now we have a student who comes into our university and is different to how we are. We're all usually a little bit older than our students. And fourth industrial revolution is starting to blur the lines between reality and fantasy. Think about how humankind is changing. Arno spoke about adapting. Adapting is changing. As a species, we are being forced to adapt faster than we are physiologically able to do. Not only are we facing technologies that we're unfamiliar with, we're facing a student who was born into, evolved in, and is still evolving within the fourth industrial revolution. The expectation of today's student is completely different to what they were 20 years ago. Think about the games that these students play, or even some small kids. Thankfully, some games have got age restrictions, but the games industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. In a game, when someone gets shot, it happens in slow motion. You can see the bullet tracking. It spirals through the air, penetrates the skin, destroys organs, blood spatters on the wall. The patient gives a death rattle. You can almost smell the blood. How can a classroom compare to that? If we think about the amount of money that has gone into creating that death, how can a classroom create? We face a student whose reality is computer generated. Beef comes from Woolies, and cows are things that you see eating grass in the rural areas. How do we bridge that gap? We simulate reality. So I'm just going to quickly, just a couple of bit of terminology, a bit of academic stuff, so that these does sound clever for a wee bit. What is simulation? Because when we talk about simulation, what are we really talking about? We're using people, devices, or conditions to try and represent authentic problems within an environment that we can control. We use it for a lot of reasons, but the main reason is we cannot control the real world. In emergency medical care, as paramedics, we cannot control what we go to. We cannot push a pause button. We cannot decide what patients we're going to go to, which means that when we take students into that environment, we don't know what we're going to get. It's like Forrest Gump said, life is like a box of chocolates. You just don't know what you're going to get. So we create a simulated environment so that we can teach them what we want to teach them. But how realistic is it really? And the clever word we use is fidelity. And in actual fact, what fidelity talks to is how realistic a simulation actually is. So when we want a patient to be treated by the student, how real are we making it? So there are three things that we look at. The first thing is the environment, where we are. As the scenario I created earlier, there's no ways we're sitting in a dark little Zama settlement at the moment. It's completely unrealistic. We're in a boardroom. The second thing is the patient fidelity. So how real is the mannequin or the whatever we're using to simulate the patient? How close does that replicate what a real patient would do? And the final one is what we call construct fidelity. In other words, how realistic is the scenario? We can't say to our student, you've been kidnapped by Klingons and your partner's been stabbed in the leg with an arsenic-tipped metal spear from one of the Klingons. automatically, the moment you hear that, okay, I actually don't believe anything that you've just said. So the entire simulation now becomes meaningless. Simulation is something that goes back centuries. We've been doing it for ages. But more recently, we've realized that it's quite an important educational tool. If you think about Sims, it probably started with war, like most things do, when people took bows and arrows and shot them at straw men that hung on a piece of wood. It's a simulation. We are simulating shooting someone. And you get better and better at shooting someone with your bow and arrow, and it works quite well. We don't do that so much anymore, certainly not here, but we're starting to realize more and more that the student experience is what we should be focusing on as opposed to the lecturer experience. What does the student need? What does the student want? Sometimes I don't think we really know that well, but if the student gets what they want, they are able to immerse themselves into the sim. They are able to become part of what's going on and believe what's happening. It's the believability that's the issue. The more real a simulation is, in other words, the more things we can take out that are artificial, the easier it is for the student to believe that they are actually in that scenario. If you had to tell a person, let's take the virtual reality stepping off the plank, you're not really 100% sure that you're not standing on the roof. So when we do that, when we create reality, the student or whoever's doing it will do what they normally do and not what they think we should want them to do. This is a picture of one of the mannequins we use, the high-fidelity mannequins. It's pretty cool. Yeah, that's what his face looks like. Doesn't change. He looks like that. However, if you look on the side there, it doesn't work on the screen, you can see those are all the things we can change. We can change tons of things in this patient's lungs. We can change the sounds that his heart makes. He generates a blood pressure. He generates a pulse. His chest rises, he breathes. The mannequin does a lot of things. He doesn't smile. Isn't that normally one of the first things that a person does is smile or look at you or open their eyes? So we face challenges like this where we've been using mannequins for a very long time. And what we've tended to do is move a little bit away from the human side of things and move more to let's replicate the other stuff. So why do we like using Sims? Well, one of the reasons is there are certain things in medicine that don't happen very often. So we can drive around for days on end and never see a specific type of patient. In Sims, we can create that patient when we want to. Mistakes don't kill mannequins, but they do kill patients. So when we are right in the beginning and we are training students, we can't say, hey guys, here's a patient, go for it. We can't do that on a mannequin because it's unlikely that you'll kill the mannequin. The worst that happens is you can maybe break him and then there's some paperwork. We can control the environment and we can direct the student the way we want them to go. In the real life, we don't really have that. And one of the things we use Sims for is assessment. Evidence that the student can do what they should be able to do. So when we send them out there, and very similar to the mining industry, our profession doesn't want people who arrive there and need 5 years of training. It works like this. You graduate, you go to the Health Professions Council, you register, you get a job, they give you the keys and say, there you go, you're on your own. And that's it. You're on your own. You're out there doing the big bad world. Sims are not the be-all, end-all, and cost is one of the major problems that we have. A decent mannequin will set you back more than R1 million. You drop it, 200,000 rands damage. So they're quite expensive. There is a lack of realism. Even though they can generate a whole lot of cool stuff, their skin is latex. It doesn't get warm. It doesn't get cold. They don't smile. He doesn't have a runny nose. One of the biggest problems or one of the biggest fears with simulation is that we're moving away from the human side and moving too much towards technology. we are dehumanizing. These are things that some people say. I think one could argue that we are dehumanizing, but by the same token that we're not. A lot of people rely too much on simulation and not enough on the real world. We don't have enough people who are actually trained in simulation. Buying a mannequin means nothing. How do you set a sim? How do you decide what the student needs to do? And students tend to be more nervous and have higher anxiety in simulation than they do in real life. But the difference is, it's because we use simulation for assessment. If you had to ask a student, what would you rather do? Fail in a sim or kill a patient and pass? Most students would probably choose the pass option. So they do tend to be more nervous in sims, but it's because we tend to use sims more for assessment than anything else. In actual fact, we're busy in our department, we're busy developing an app for assessment, specifically that integrates students into the classroom as well, because this is something that we've identified. But as I said, electronically, we can do so many things with mannequins. We can change their rhythms, their heart sounds. The nice thing about mannequins, though, you get what you pay for. The more you want, the more you must spend. So you've really, and this is with most things in life, you've really got to decide, what do I want? What do I need? Because some of the stuff you need may be very expensive, which means some of the stuff you want, you can't have anymore. So the challenge is we live in an LMIC, a low medium income country. We are more of a medium income country, but there are a lot of countries that are a lot poorer than we are. That possibly don't even have a single mannequin, $1 million mannequin in their whole country. So it's not just about what can we do, it's how do we help other people? How do we bring people into our garden? So as I said earlier, the mannequin skin is what it is, doesn't change. We have mannequins that don't even bend their arms. The mannequin costs R1 million. It can do almost anything. It doesn't bend. It sits like this. All day, every day. It sits with its arms like this. Now, that's not really realistic. I don't know how many people you know walk around like this all day, every day, but not often. So when we look at this guy, we see this expressionless face. When we look at the arms are like this. How then do we get over that? How then do we take this face and turn it into something that means something for a student? Where do we focus our training? Well, South Africa is unfortunately, we have one of the highest incidents of violence in the world. There's about 3 countries that are above us, and it's like Mexico, Colombia. They got drug lords running around. They're war zones. They're classified as war zones. We're right up there. We may not be very good at soccer, cricket, or rugby, but we're pretty good at violence. So how do we educate our students for these types of environments? How do we educate our students for these types of patients? 4-Hour Art gives us many, many different ways of diagnosing patients. And if you go and look at the stuff now, CAT scans. The CAT scan machine was developed in South Africa. An amazing piece of machinery. Where is it? In the hospital. So a lot of the stuff that's really cool that 4-Hour has given the medical field is not with us in the boot of our car. It's in the hospital. We tend to forget about the patient. Sir William Osler highlights the importance of the person. He has 2 quotes. The good physician treats the disease. The great physician treats the patient who has the disease. He also says it's much more important to know what sort of a patient has the disease than what sort of disease the patient has. We have a patient who's a human. And this is where we maybe start to see a little bit of dissonance between 4-Hour and health, where the machines and the people. Someone spoke a little bit earlier about Terminator, and I know Prof. Rory was talking about wanting to be a cyborg. It actually sounds quite cool. But the 4th Industrial Revolution, the one thing we tend to forget, it's moving so fast. Our environment is changing so quickly that we as a species are staying behind. We are not made for what we are doing now. We haven't had a chance to physiologically adapt. We have new diseases. We have new pathologies. And we need to start looking around things of how do we keep up. And in the emergency medical care domain where we work, we see faster cars. We have things like global travel. Now, if there's that thing now, I think it's on one of the channels, Hot Zone. Yes. Which happened. There was almost an Ebola outbreak in America. If there was an Ebola outbreak in a major center and they were unable to contain it, it would be around the world in a couple of hours. That's how quickly people move. It never used to happen. It would wipe out a community. Now it could wipe out the planet. The same with flu. We've got pretty good at killing people. We boast as the guys that make lots of war, we don't do that, fortunately, as a country, but how they can pinpoint accuracy, drop a bomb. That's pretty cool because then there's less collateral damage. Less people who shouldn't die don't die. We're all excited. But what about the people at the receiving end of the bomb? What about the humans on the front of that new bullet? What about the people who are victims of mob justice? But more importantly, what about the people who need to treat them? This isn't a video game. There's no restart button. You can't respawn. You can't go and find a nice little quiet corner and your power goes up. So our duty as educators is to teach our students and to prepare our students to deal with the real world. We teach them with mannequins. But how do we recreate wounds? How do we recreate the environment? How do we recreate the patient? What new ways can we use to bridge the gap? And a lot of those have been spoken about today. Despite the advances, 4R still needs to play a little bit of catch-up because the machines haven't quite taken over yet. We're still in charge now. We might not be in a while, but we are still. And ignorance is not bliss. We have to embrace 4R. The solutions are there. We just need to think about them. Sometimes we need to look back as well as forward. Maybe look closer to home because the solution sometimes stares us at the face. I'm going to show you a photo to demonstrate. If you've got a sensitive stomach, you might want to quickly look away, but look between your fingers because it's quite important that you do see the photo. And I do have the patient's permission to show this photo. Okay. Patient involved in an industrial accident where his hand was caught in a large metal press. Fortunately, his work colleague was able to press the emergency stop, the big red button, before the patient got pulled into the machine. The clever word for this injury is an avulsion. To the man on the street, the word they use is gross. What do you think when you look at it? Imagine this is the first wound you ever see, and you have to now manage the patient. Second one, domestic abuse. She's so severely beaten by her boyfriend that her left eye is completely swollen shut, and you can see the extensive tissue trauma to the area. What if I told you this, that neither of these were patients? The first is the hand of a student. The hand was moulaged using Play-Doh, the same stuff your kids play with if you have kids, or you still play with if you are still a kid, done by a fellow student. The second, also a student who was moulaged by a fellow student. Pretty realistic. Can't buy this stuff. So let's think about this. Where does 4R come into this kind of stuff? Well, first of all, you need a recipe to make Play-Doh. Where's that? On the internet. Students, these were first-year students, so they are what we like to call novices. They haven't seen a lot of dead people. They haven't seen a lot of trauma. They go into the internet and they have a look at how do you make a wound? Or, oh, this is what it looks like. And then they recreate it. Without things like the internet, this would never happen. We used old technology, Play-Doh, which kids have been playing with for many years, and new technology to create something that changed the way students saw the patients. We immersed them in their learning by allowing them to create the realism. And this is the thing about immersion, is the student needs to be the driver of how realistic they perceive it to be. Let's go back to fidelity. Imagine you create this type of wound and the student is the person who's sitting here. It's not that realistic. So even though we can create these, we need to start thinking about creating environments. And this is where I think a lot of the scanning stuff comes in, and we're definitely going to get an email from you very soon. And that kind of stuff, how do you take someone from a classroom, keep them in the classroom, but project them to the motor vehicle accident on the side of the road? That's 4R. It also doesn't help that we create a realistic environment and we have a non-realistic patient. That's also not going to help. So we need to get them all together. The nice thing about the moulage is it was quite cheap. We moulaged about 30 people all in all, and it probably cost us about 300 Rand. It's not that expensive. It's there, it's available for people. What is also nice, though, is that we can take this and put it on a real patient. Patient can scream, the patient can talk, which the mannequin doesn't. What we really need to do is we need to learn to free our minds. I think many of us are still stuck in our ways and how we view technology. Many people are still scared of technology. We're scared of job losses. I think that's the thing that often comes up in this thing is job losses. Yes, there will probably be job losses, but there's always job losses. When the economy goes down, there's job losses. There's a whole lot of reasons why there's job losses, but we need to reskill. We need to adapt. And the challenge for us as educators is to find the balance and realize that the limitations in the past are the solutions of the future. We need to remember that people are people and that humans need human interaction. And in the healthcare sector, it is really, really important to nurture that relationship building that happens between a patient and the practitioner, which is very difficult to do with a computer. We use simple Play-Doh to solve a problem, but in retrospect, imagine we employed the full might of the fourth industrial revolution. Imagine we took the advancing virtual reality from gaming and employed it in our environment. Imagine we were able to create more immersive environments. Imagine. The fourth industrial revolution is not driven by machines, but by the people who drive the machines. Without healthy drivers, the machines are not going to work. So when we train medical personnel, who are the people who fix the drivers of the machines, we need to figure out how to do it properly. We need to start looking outside the box, outside of the traditional. If you'd asked me before this morning if I would have considered making my Sims more realistic by speaking to the Department of Mining, I would have told you that you've been smoking some really strange stuff because they dig holes underground. I've worked in the mine. They don't do virtual reality kind of stuff. Things are changing, and they are changing really, really quickly. We need to be aware that without freedom in thinking, and that's really what's involved in the fundamentals of 4R's freedom of thinking, we would have never thought about moulage. I would have never thought of going and speaking to the guys from the mining department. To go back to a quote by Chinua Achebe, thank you for coming to our village and seeing the moon from our perspective. And in the same way, for the people who presented today and the people who've asked questions, thank you for showing us the moon from your perspective, because it teaches us. As a postscript, if we look at the fourth industrial revolution, it's not just about technology. It's about how technology can help us. Someone who's working at a medical school in Zambia, who has a $30 budget, can do this. They would not be able to do it unless they could access this information, which they can do now. Remember the dragon? The one with the big teeth? The nostril? The fire-breathing creature? It was so real. As I said earlier, now go and ask Kit Harington, who's the guy who played Jon Snow, what the dragon felt like. He'll probably simply say that it looked like a green screen and it felt like air. But our students won't say that. Our students will not say that their simulated patient or their simulated environment was a green screen and felt like air. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Makink. Do we have any questions for him? Okay, we've got a question here.
So Andrew, I'm intrigued by the idea of the clay mixed with the virtual reality. I really think that that to me opens up a completely new way of thinking, which I just haven't seen. So just as a comment, maybe to start with, I think that's wonderful because it brings together technology, and we don't think of clay as technology, do we? I mean, we think of it as clay, but it's actually technology in of itself. So my question would be, so what do you foresee then as a next step? What would you like to see in emergency medical care training in, let's say, 3 years from now? What is it that you think is the next step?
So, thanks, Andre. I think it's a very good question. Personally, I would like to see students being more involved in driving their own learning, which is what we did with this project. One of the things you can buy moulage. It costs about 22,000 rand for a set, and it's not realistic at all. So, you know, I think the problem we face is trying to integrate what 4RR really means. And until we really understand it very well, we don't really know what we can get out of it. I think just listening to the guys from mining and the stuff that they're doing, and Arno's presentation earlier today, the possibilities are really endless. But I think we need to understand what our students want and what our students need. And that comes from engagement with the different sectors. But also, I think the most important thing is that the students need to experience reality in an environment that we can control, because it is reckless of us to send students out there who don't have enough experience. The way we do sims, we do them in a classroom. So we have a very good mannequin, but our environment is not really that great. We are busy building a more realistic environment. But I think the challenge is that without that reality, the only reality they experience is on the road, which is quite a limited time. So, and there's quite a lot of work in medicine going on where they're actually removing people out of the clinical environment and putting them in a simulated environment and counting that as clinical time. So I think it's actually serving our students better with 4R and silly things like clay. Yes, sorry, there's one at the back. So, well, we run a 4-year bachelor's degree, but one of the things, and this is exactly where simulation comes in. Simulation comes in to take theory and put it into practice. So we basically have 3 components. We have theory, practice, and clinical practice. So the clinical practice, they go and work out there. Theory is we teach them all the stuff out of the books. And then in practical, we try and marry the theory with the practical so that when they go out and work on the road, they have done stuff before. So all asthma patients are different, for example. There's no one asthma patient that's exactly the same as the other. But we will teach them in the classroom the principle of managing an asthma patient. So that when they see one on the road, it's not the first time they've ever seen them, and they know what to do. And it's not just a page out of a textbook. They've actually they've treated our simulated patient. They've treated our doll. Yeah, if you can kind of imagine first aid being a 4-year degree, it's kind of the same type of thing, just a lot more intense, obviously, and managing patients who are much sicker than you would normally see in first aid. So, So I think it's probably best if I answer that afterwards because it's a very long legal, there's a whole lot of stuff to talk about from a regulator perspective and all that. So I think it's probably easier if I just maybe chat to you afterwards. If you've got about half an hour afterwards, maybe. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And yeah, and it's very important to do that, to expose them to that practical, but the theory and the prac must go together. And we actually, it's a little bit on the boy side, but to create reality, we take our students to the Gariep Dam in the Free State. The third year students go on a rescue exercise there. And they fly in helicopters. And it sounds really cool until you've been in a helicopter. It's noisy, and you cannot simulate that. The amount of, it's just noise and movement, and until you've been there, you don't know what it's like to fly in a helicopter. So that's really the important thing as well, is when we simulate stuff to make it as real as possible. So as they were saying earlier, they've got noises when the guys are walking in the virtual reality mine. There's noise and wind, and that just adds more to the reality, which makes it more believable. So now if I'm marking on the wall, in my mind, this is real. If I get it wrong, people could die. And that's really what it's all about. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Andrew Makink. Right now, we're going to have a panel discussion with electrical and engineering science students, which will be coordinated by Dr. Roland Heyman. And on the panel, we have Ms. Shiska Deda, Ms. Pratika Maharaj, Mr. Marcel Sagman, and Mr. Jonathan Jacobs. We will be having a discussion on applications of serious games in the fourth industrial revolution. Please give them a round of applause. Take this mic. How many do we have?
Between us two and one between us.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me and my students here. We are from the Department of Electrical and Electronic Engineering Science here on the Auckland Park campus at the University of Johannesburg. And we have actually started a few years ago with quite an interesting project where we want to use game to better the community. So you all, I suppose, are aware of games. You've all played games on your cell phone and on the laptop. And usually if you're playing games, people think, oh, you're just wasting time. Your mom will tell you, please go and study, do something productive. So what we want to do is to actually take games and all that mechanisms that you have in there and that makes it fun and enjoyable, and also turn that into something that is serious and can teach you something and can benefit the community. So that is known as serious games. It can still be fun, so we don't take the fun out of it, but we want you to learn something or to gain a skill, etc., etc. So I have a few students that has been making games for the past few years. Some of them for the past few years, some of them only started recently. And maybe we can start out by them just introducing themselves.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Marcel Sagman. I'm currently working on my PhD in telecoms and data science. I'm heavily involved into game programming. So I guess today I'm going to explain a little bit of the programs I've been working on.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Jacobs. I'm currently completing my master's in electrical engineering, and did my honors project on a game, on a serious game, which we'll talk about today. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hi, my name is Pratika Maharaj, and I'm in the process of completing my undergrad, about to start my postgrad master's in electrical and electronic. And yeah, this is sort of my first time designing games, so I'm fairly new to this whole process. And yeah, I'd like to share my experience. Thanks.
My name is Shiksha Dera, and I'm currently a master's student at the University of Johannesburg. My master's is in electrical and electronics engineering, but my focus is on interactive gaming to aid with anxiety management. And one of the things which really interests me about my research is that a few years ago, I think society's perception about gaming and mental health was very different to what it is now. I think people are viewing it in a more positive, more holistic light. And I think the fact that I can combine these two seemingly unrelated topics in an engineering research field makes me think that as a society, intellectually, we're slowly evolving. And I'm really happy to be a part of that.
Okay. Thank you very much. Shiksha told us a bit about her game. Maybe the rest of you can tell us the problem that you are addressing and maybe just an overview of the game that you are looking at.
So my problem basically tackles fine motor skill development for children. So this game is basically focused on children between the age groups of 5 and 8 years old. And the whole simple idea of maybe touching your pinky finger with your thumb is more complex as a child, because you don't really, your spatial awareness is not fully developed, and the cognitive development process is not as advanced as you would think. And the problems associated with this is you visibly see bad handwriting. They might have a problem with balancing and, like hitting into objects and stuff, because their cognitive development hasn't reached its full potential. So my game is focused on developing this, and it's quite a simple, basically it's a simple idea, but now there's a electronic device, this game, as you can see, I've brought my prototype with. It's basic. It's just communicating between Unity games, and it indicates to the child when they press a button. And this is for fine motor skill development in their fingers, movement in their fingers. Thanks.
All right. So in my game, in my honors project, I looked at midline crossing. So just simply, midline crossing is a child who has difficulty crossing the midline will actually, if they're brushing their teeth, for example, instead of, or I'll just demonstrate, they will, instead of moving their hand, they'll just move their head, because they actually, that they are unaware that they can cross the midline and actually just brush their teeth with their hands, which is the same thing with if you would tie your shoelace. And these difficulties then will obviously hinder their growth through, if they start writing or reading. If you read, your eyes will move from left to right, crossing the midline, which will affect that. And then what I'm doing now for my masters is actually building. Well, I'm enhancing the game and the interactive tool, but I'm providing a monitoring tool for the game, which we'll talk about through the course of this discussion. Yeah, that's good for now.
All right, so for the past 2 years, I've been working on code breakers. I'm sure most of you have heard about code breakers. So basically, we build games to help our telecoms 4th-year students, because telecoms can be really complicated, especially when it comes to information theory. So what we do is we started by building a 2D version where you go there and you play in the game, you enjoy yourself, but we're asking you some of these questions, the telecoms questions. You can get them right or wrong. And depending on how much of them you get right, you can move to different levels where we test you different sets of questions. But this year or last year, we tried to move to a 3D version, because we tried to improve on user experience. Those that play the game, they complain that when it's 2D, it's a little challenging and people got stuck in a loop. You answer a question, you get wrong, you're stuck at that stage forever. So we try to improve on that. We now have a 3D version, which hopefully we're supposed to launch today, but I don't have my laptop yet to demonstrate. So what the 3D does is you find yourself in the game. So now they'll be playing a real game. So this is what we call an actual game. So someone playing the game, at some point they'll feel different. It's not like I'm just playing some 2D game and maybe at some point you get distracted and you lose track of what you're doing. With this game, you're actually in the world. It's 3D. So we use what we call the first person controller where you actually see yourself in the game. Now with this, the students, hopefully they're gonna improve on the performance because now we're giving them a lot of opportunity to meet a lot of the information to pass questions where they can try and answer them. We also have on the back end a mechanism to actually test all of this. So it also saves the lecturer's time. So the students don't come and consult every day for the same question. Now they can just go online and answer this question. Then we mark them automatically and we tell them where they're struggling or where they're doing really well, or maybe think of associating them into groups so that they can solve more difficult questions. So, but I'll explain more as we go along. I'm sure she has more questions about the game. It's a really big game, so I'm sure she has a lot more to ask as we go along.
Marcel mentioned code breakers now. For those of you who want to play it, the link is available online. So you can go and you can see if you can actually break some codes in the game and learn some fourth-year telecommunications. For now, we want to delve a little deeper in the specific games. First, Shiksha, I want to ask you, so you're talking about anxiety. How is that such a big problem? We all feel a little bit down every now and again. Why would you look at that?
Okay, well, as you mentioned, a lot of people feel anxious a lot of times. Like you feel a little nervous sometimes, maybe you're starting a new job, maybe you're learning how to drive. But what happens when your feelings of anxiousness actually start hindering your daily functioning? What happens? Some people actually can't even leave their houses at some point because the anxiety gets that bad. And the thing is, anxiety disorders aren't as uncommon as what we think. It's estimated that 260 million people globally are actually affected by anxiety and anxiety-related disorders. And in a country like America, Forbes estimated that only about 37% of these people try and get treatment for their anxiety. So in a country like America, where the healthcare is so established, if that's the statistic, in a developing country, I'm sure the statistic is even more frightening. So, I mean, why don't people want to get treatment for the anxiety? Well, possible reasons are financial and physical limitations. Perhaps they don't feel comfortable discussing personal problems with strangers. And also, maybe, I mean, whether we want to accept it or not, there's still a large amount of societal shame associated with acknowledging that you have a mental or behavioral disorder. People are afraid that maybe people will think they're strange or weird, and maybe they'll start treating them differently. So I think that's one of the reasons why anxiety, we don't know that it is, but I think a lot of people silently suffer with it. So that's why I wanted to create something which could put someone in control of their own anxiety management.
But treatments for this already exist. Why would you make a game to address this?
You're very right. I think the three main types of treatments are psychotherapy, which are counseling, so going to a therapist, medication, and then complementary and alternative treatments like yoga, meditation, and any self-induced relaxation technique. But the problem with these are that, as I mentioned, they are limiting. Many people can't afford certain treatments and medications. There are side effects to medications, and many people aren't even aware of the extent of the different amounts of complementary and alternative treatments. So I think a big problem is also awareness. So if you give somebody a game which they can interact with and experience for themselves, perhaps they themselves will find a guided framework to develop a relaxation technique in. And it might not even reach the stage where they have to go to the extent of medication and intensive psychotherapy. So I think I wanted to make a very accessible, low-cost treatment for people who experience anxiety. So that's how it falls in the niche. It falls between the niches of the available treatments that are there.
At the end of the day, we are still just engineers. Have you talked to any professionals about the game?
Well, in my undergraduate project, which was the initial prototype, I consulted serious game developers and psychologists. So I got feedback for the technical side and the mental health side. A lot of psychologists felt that it was a novel idea, that it could work if I improved a bit on it. I know one of the criticisms I received was that the aesthetic appeal wasn't very high, which I can agree. I have to work on the graphics a lot. And also another issue that they had was my game was only playable on a computer, and it has an interactive stress ball. So people felt that for people that are anxious to have to remember to bring a stress ball and their computer everywhere with them for whenever they feel anxious could actually make them more anxious. So on my master's research, I'm trying to improve on that. I'm actually trying to integrate it into a phone cover. I mean, most of us have our phones all the time. And if you lose your phone cover, chances are you probably lost your phone. So I think you'd have a bigger problem then. So, and as you mentioned, in terms of engineering, there is an electronic side to it as well. There's a pressure sensor in the actual stress ball, which responds to the amount of pressure that the user exerts on it. And then it also has a Bluetooth module. So in the initial prototype, no one wants to use a wired stress ball. I mean, that would be irritating for anybody, let alone people that are anxious. So with the Bluetooth module, for people that like pacing up and down, they can walk up to 9 meters away from the computer and still be able to interact with the game. So I'm going to improve on the electronics as well in my master's research. So I think that's the engineering aspect to it.
Your game is quite novel in the way that the levels work compared to traditional games. Maybe you can elaborate on that.
As we know, most games start at an easy level and then gradually work to the toughest level. So my game actually works in the opposite way. It starts at the toughest level and you gradually end at the easiest level. So basically, to give you an example, you have the stress ball in your hand and you open the game. The game will say, press the stress ball with as much force as you can for, let's say, 25 seconds. And it will only respond once you do that. Once you press the ball as hard as you can and the maximum force is registered on the force sensor. Then after you complete that, then it will move on to the next level, which will say, press the ball with less force for a shorter amount of time. So the reason why I tried doing this was so that as you exert less and less physical force throughout the levels of the game, gradually, hopefully you'll exert less and less. I mean, you'll have released more and more mental tension. So basically, it tries to subconsciously get the user to indirectly walk out of an anxiety attack, basically, through playing the game.
How do you think the fourth industrial revolution will change anxiety treatment?
Well, for me personally, I think one of the main things of the fourth industrial revolution is that more information and data will be accessible to more people. And I think in terms of healthcare, that's kind of revolutionary because healthcare is limited a lot by physical and financial limitations, as are most things. And I feel like if it's more accessible to people, if information is more accessible to people, if you can monitor people's conditions easier, if you can diagnose conditions quicker, I think healthcare will become much more faster, I think, in general. Like if I think about my game, if people can find that they can use it instead of constantly having to go to a therapist, I think that would save them money and time. And in fact, later on, perhaps I could integrate a way where if they are working with a therapist, their therapist could actually monitor their progress on the internet or online through an app without them having to physically go there and discuss what is happening every single week and taking out time to do that every week and paying a therapist for a separate session just to discuss your progress every single week. So I think the fourth industrial revolution will revolutionize healthcare and hopefully mental healthcare, which I think is very overlooked at this point.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So as we mentioned, Shiksha started with this project as part of her final year capstone project, in electrical electronic engineering. The work that she has done in her fourth year has now been accepted at the international conference, and she will be going to Japan at the beginning of August to present her work. Yeah. So there's definitely not just something that we do there in our little lab, but it's something that has international appeal. Last year, Jonathan went to the same conference, then it was in Austria. Jonathan, can you maybe give us an overview of what your feeling was on the international level?
Definitely. I just want to touch on a few points. So I attended it was the SIGA 2018 conference in Austria, Serious Games and Applications for Health. At the conference, it was just clear that we were not the only people doing this, which we were aware of. We were exposed to many, other projects and other actual games that have funding from all around the world. Particularly, I would like to mention there was actually a simulator game. So from the talk that was just before this one, that where they actually had a mannequin and are developing. They're developing mannequins with virtual reality, which I mean, in the fourth industrial revolution is just going to be, I think, extremely beneficial. And just to add on, in terms of a fourth industrial revolution and how that would, how serious games can, how it would benefit South Africa and just the world is. So in my project now, so one of the things that I've researched is access to obviously healthcare and access to therapy. When you go into rural areas in South Africa, there's many, or the majority of children are not even exposed to therapy or to even difficulties that they have. So with the fourth industrial revolution, if games can be found in creches, for example, these a therapist can actually be on the other side. And by the other side, I don't mean other side of the computer. They can actually be remote. They can be remote or in a remote place and just actually monitor who's playing the game and the results from the game and be able to see the players who are playing the game and actually detect. So I don't know if I can start talking about my game now. So in my game, so as I said, it's midline crossing. So in the first level, I'm actually able to detect whether a child has midline crossing difficulties. So from that, if we put that in the fourth industrial revolution, a occupational therapist could be at home while a child is in a school playing the game, and they can actually pick up that the child has a difficulty. With that, they can actually monitor the results. And level 2, which is a treatment level, which they can actually use the data that was picked up in the level 1 and treat the patient accordingly. They can set the level up for the child to play. And again, just to touch on fourth industrial revolution, this data that they've collected, the more data that the game collects, the more accurate the game becomes, and the more accurate the tool becomes. So from that perspective, it's just it's exponential how the fourth industrial revolution, accompanied with serious games, can not only assist these children, but I think just the healthcare industry and therapy in general.
You have also been working with occupational therapists. Yeah. So when you went out to them for the first time and began talking about gaming, how were they responding to you? Are they open to these new ideas?
So I would like to answer that. If you tell someone, if you tell someone something innovative or cool, they're ready for it. So, and also I think occupational therapists today, if the way they're conventionally treating their patients or the children are through conventional methods, like they'll be for crossing the midline, they'll have a simple puzzle where they'll move pieces from the one side of the table to the other, or they'll use scissors, like a paper and scissors, which children are doing in school, but they have difficulty doing it. Whereas here with serious games, it can open up doors, as the occupational therapist was actually saying, or the many occupational therapists that I spoke to, instead of children doing tasks that they would do in school, or their creche, they will be able to immerse themselves into a virtual game, and not only that, the intrinsic, the motivation of the child, as soon as you tell them, you're going to go and play a game now. For them, it's like, cool, I want to go play a game, So the occupational therapists definitely were open to it. Of course, when it comes with new ideas, it needs to be accepted, and it needs to be, obviously when I was doing the testing with them, there was a few things that were picked up, but I definitely think through the iterative process that we're going through and through research, we definitely can solve for the little nitty-gritty things that they want to improve on. But to answer your question, they're open to it.
The idea of using technology for therapy was definitely not our idea. You can go and buy a Wii or a Kinect. So aren't you reinventing the wheel?
Yeah, so to answer that directly, absolutely not. No, so look, so at the end of the day, so you have many other technologies, you have many other software, and through our research or through my research, what I found was that you have, for example, the Microsoft Connect or any virtual camera which can it can monitor the movement, but then in a rural area to start setting up these for Microsoft Connect you need to plug it into computers, and most of the time an Xbox. If you have a PlayStation, you need the Sony R toy. If you have you can use a Leap Motion. There's many technologies that you can use that you actually need a device. And with that device is obviously the financial constraints. With the device that I've created, it's a low-cost sensor worth 150 rand. That's Bluetooth. 150 rand cost. When you can, if it was mass-produced, it could be even less. And all you need to do is turn it on, and the Bluetooth gets picked up, and it will connect to the game, which can be available on your phone as well. So definitely the cost. The cost is definitely something, as well as it's a device that can be used for other fine and gross motor skills. It doesn't have to only be used for crossing the midline. If you develop more onto the sensor, yeah.
Thank you very much. Moving on to Marcel. So you are working on this game for a fourth-year module that we teach in the department, fourth-year telecommunications. But the first time you were introduced to the game, you were still also a fourth-year student. So you started out by playing some of these games before you started developing it. What was your experience playing that as a student?
Honestly speaking, it was very interesting. I think as a student, without these games, we go back to traditional method of studying. The students, they go through the note, they look for some past papers, they try to do them. Even if they're wrong, they usually don't seek for correct answers. Or you get a lot of students email you with the same question over and over. So when I played the game the first time myself as a student, it was really interesting because now I have a lot of questions and I could get instantaneous answers to tell me if I'm right or wrong, to tell me if I'm ready for a test or not. So I would say it was really interesting, although, yeah, when I played also, I saw some little gap in her, which I thought I could also get involved in the development process as a software specialist. So, yeah, I think it was a really nice idea to actually come up with games to help with these kind of questions, yeah.
When you heard in class that you need to go and play a game, or you could go play a game, did you think your lecturer was crazy? Or how did you?
Obviously, it was exciting. Imagine a lecturer pops up in class and say, guys, go and play a game. I have some game for you. Everyone will want to play the game. If you use the word game, they will go and play a game. If you say, go and study for your test, it's like, oh, another test again. Everyone. But if you say a game, they'll want to see what is there. So that was the excitement. So I think it helped a lot over the years. I think that's been helping a lot of the students. For me personally, I thought it was remarkable because then it answers a lot of my questions and I get instantaneous feedback. The key was the feedback. You get instantaneous feedback, you see your progress, you see if you're ready or not. So it was really cool. Yeah.
So the game that you also can go play online called Code Breakers, that was a 2D game. And we particularly kept it simple and 2D and a very retro effect because we did not have a huge budget for graphics and we did not want to compete with these traditional games. But now the one that we're busy with now, Enigma, that Marshall is busy developing, that has quite a different feel. Can you maybe explain a bit of the differences between the two games?
Okay, the first game, like we said, was 2D. If you tell someone to go play it, like you said before, go play it, they will play it, but it will look too simple. They won't really want to maybe like to play it again beside the question that they're going to see there. But with Enigma, what we're building is 3D, so the graphics is there. It's really cool. So the students, and most students don't like games, trust me. So if they play this game, they're going to enjoy it, and that will force them to constantly be practicing. Hence, we increase our pass rate for the model. And as a consequence, we also invite the other faculties or departments to also maybe engage with us and see how we can expand the game so that other departments also train their students via games. So this game, like I said, is 3D, is where we officially launched it. I would like to invite everyone to go and try it out. It's really interesting. And the cool thing about this is also the way we're going to give you your feedback. We're even planning to incorporate a little bit of AI at some point. So once you play in the game, it's going to be tracking your success rate, and we're going to try and maybe cluster people into groups. So if most of you struggle with the specific questions, you can all instantaneously receive a message and meet a lecturer at this time. And it actually helps the lecturer. There is going to have like a little meeting with a group of students that are struggling with a specific kind of question. Rather than everyone emailing the lecturer saying, I don't know this, I don't know this. So the game, this 3D version, we're going to have good feedback. We're going to try and incorporate some AI. And yeah, so the user experience also will be tremendous because it's good graphics and it's nice playing the game and you see yourself in the game. It's not like you see a little puppy jumping around. So it's kind of a little boring, but with 3D, yeah, it's really interesting. So even an adult will play it, even someone not doing telecoms, they might play it and even get interested in knowing what telecoms is all about just because of the game. Yeah.
So at the moment, Marshall is working on the project, but this is not what he's doing for his doctorate degree. So he's doing that extra on the side. And I mean, one of these days will be finished with your doctorate, you'll go out and look for a job. Do you think that you have learned some skills by being part of this project that will help you in the future?
Yeah, definitely. Although I learned a little bit of C# when I did my BSc IT, that was a couple of years back. But working on this game, I faced a lot of challenges. So I actually finished my IT with very good grades, but when I started working on this game, it's as if I didn't know how to program. So I would say that I've learned a lot. It was a really new platform. Unity is a little challenging, especially if you're trying to build complicated functions and algorithms. It becomes really difficult. So I would say that at the moment, there's no challenge that I can conquer because I've seen the upper level of difficulty.
Let's move on to Pratika. You are the newest member to our group. You only started in January with your game.
Yeah.
What was your initial thoughts when you heard you're going to be working on a game? Are you a gamer at all?
Well, I am a gamer. I enjoy adventure games, it keeps me entertained. But the one nice thing I think about starting off with Unity is the availability of information you can find. You can really start and get into it because of this. There's so many forums. Unity itself gives so many, helping folders, documentation, videos on YouTube. There's a lot that actually helps when you're starting. Like, I'm completely new to developing games and anything like this. So the process was interesting, but very, very helpful in terms of, Unity gaming itself. Yeah, it was a good experience.
How are you planning on testing the game?
So I actually do want to, as you can see, the prototype, it's quite big. It was modeled for my hand, but I want to make this smaller for children. But in order for me to do that, I need to go throughout the channels of getting ethical permission and things like this. So testing it itself, I'm testing the the robustness of the performance in terms of the performance and how fast the communication is sent between I have a Bluetooth module here, how fast it can be sent. But eventually I would like kids to actually be exposed to it, to see how they're going to react to it. Because I know the one thing about children is that you have to try a lot to keep their attention. So like this glove looks really cool. So I'm hoping like this design is gonna really like intrigue kids to actually play with us and actually improve, their development process.
Do you have any plans to include more Fourth Industrial Revolution features?
I do. So one of the software elements or the coding elements is that I want to try and incorporate some AI because as they're kids, everyone develops in their own way. They're unique. So to incorporate AI, I think like adding a element which basically works on that specific kid in the sense that every kid would react at their own pace. So the reaction speed and the accuracy. So AI in the sense that I'll initialize the game to just have like a like a 4-minute or 5-minute, like starting input to the game, so that the game understands what the player is capable of, and then progressively challenges them through levels, so that they can, you develop themselves in their fine motor skills development. Yeah.
What is your aim, or what do you wish to achieve in terms of society in general?
Well, affordability. I want everyone to experience this, and in terms of society, I think something like this in the fourth industrial revolution, like if the government helps society implement, more computers available for kids in general, I think that the idea of developing cognitive development to move your fingers, it's a simple idea, but if they can start at a younger age and they get more exposure to computers and things like that, I think, in society it will definitely benefit, and progressively it helps a child develop, their balance, and they, in terms of their handwriting, so they get to achieve, academically, they can achieve better, improve in their skills academically and in terms of sports.
Great. In general, for the panel, we are, like we said, from electrical electronic engineering, so we are engineers. We don't just want to program games, so the hardware part is very important to us. Can you maybe tell us a bit more about the hardware that you have developed? I think she already told us a bit. I think Jonathan can tell us he went through quite a process to get where he is now.
So basically, my honors. Okay, so when deciding which game or what type of movement you want to track, don't use horizontal in the air. When if you have touch sensors or pressure sensors, it's a reading that you're looking for. When you're tracking movement from or linear movement or side to side, there's like a gyroscope which you can tilt, so you can move something on the screen very easily if you tilt. But to actually physically track if the hand is in the center or right or left, in space was a extremely challenging task. And using high grade maths, you could get there. But if you can use maths, that's good. You can get there. What I also did though, and it also becomes quite expensive in terms of sensors that you would have to use. So to keep the low cost down, I just implemented a horizontal movement. I used a potentiometer. So I'm tracking the resistance from side to side, and as the resistance increases or decreases, I map it into the game. So it's just a low cost, creative, innovative method to track horizontal motion instead of using a magnetometer. Well, actually, the magnetometer was another way to do it with a compass, which was quite cool.
But that's actually the one that you have now, some mechanical engineering as well in there.
Yeah. So then I ended up incorporating some mechanical engineering to actually create a low cost, like a casing for this horizontal movement, because it's not, you think it's quite easy just to track or to have pressure, if a child is moving it across, but when you start building it becomes a more challenging task. But we have the casing now, which had to incorporate some mechanical engineering, but that's what engineers do, and with the internet, and it helps. So I had to actually design a new casing. But the technology is definitely something, in South Africa, to be able to get these devices. If we can incorporate that into our sensors and stuff, it will definitely be of assistance.
So some of you, you've been with us for your capstone project and for master's, Shiksha as well. Pratika is busy with her capstone project, but she's also going to join us for a master's. Mashala has been with us for a few years. Do you think that you are staying and continuing with this because it is such an enriching experience? It's not just straightforward engineering, but you're also learning about development and anxiety and mental health. Do you think this enriched the whole experience for you?
Most definitely. So of course, to be able to go to present overseas, your capstone project was a unbelievable experience, and I think that also gave me some motivation to carry on. But through carrying on and researching, sometimes I get too involved with occupational therapy and children than I actually am with my masters, which it's got its positives and negatives, but most definitely, it's when you're learning engineering or when you're studying engineering, you encounter many challenges, and in studying, and when it comes to when it's came to the capstone and to masters, it's amazing how much I can learn, how much I can study, how much I can do engineering, but through actually studying and research, we actually in turn helping, and creating ideas that can be incorporated into our country. So definitely, it motivates, and it's kept me going. It's probably one of
Just to add on to what John said, there have been many points in my project when I felt like a pseudo engineer. I felt like, I know on projects day, there were people that came with complicated algorithms, neural networks, and I was like, I have an interactive wall. So, and then I take a step back and I think, what is engineering really at the core? And for me personally, engineering is optimization, not just making systems or processes more optimal. I think at the core root, we can talk about making society more optimal. And I think if you really look hard enough, I don't know if this is just me as an engineering student speaking, but I think there's engineering in everything. And I think to find that engineering and to sort of harness it and try and make it better with the skills that I've learned, I think that's one of the most enriching experiences I've experienced with my own project. And I think, well, maybe I just say that to not feel like a pseudo engineer, but I feel like for me, to be able to see engineering in sort of mental health, to be able to see it in behavioral disorders, I think that's very enriching. It's not just limited to sort of math and science, which I think a lot of people think it is. So personally, on a very personal level, for me, that was what stood out the most in my project.
No, I just want to say how exciting it is to progress from studying, like you surrounded by coding or you surrounded by little microcontrollers. But then when you broaden your scope and you actually start studying how, like you said, occupational therapy and all these movements and incorporating I enjoy engineering, I like everything about it. But now when you incorporate it to life, that's so special and awesome.
At the beginning of the year, we had a one-week hackathon with Liquid Telecom South Africa. And we actually had some students here. We had people from the learnership program. And in that week, we had like 2 days of classes where we taught these students how to make a simple game.
Span of 1 week, how so many people can learn so many different skills and adapt themselves. I think if we can expose more people from underprivileged areas to these skills, I think we'll be surprised as to what, as South Africans and as a developing country, we can actually come up with. So I think for me to see people make that transition in a week from not knowing anything to making like a proper playable game, that was very interesting for me to see. And it opened me up to the possibility of what can be done on a larger scale in our communities.
Yeah, so I'll just add on to what Shiksha was saying. I was quite impressed. So after the lectures, if I think of a normal BSc IT student, typically they have to program for 3 years to be able to create a game. Or for an engineer, obviously, is when you get to your 4th year that you can actually code. But we get these kids and they've never programmed before, and we just train them for 2 days, give them 3 days to come out with a game. Surprisingly, we had about 10 games. I was shocked. It means that the idea about 4IR is actually a possibility. It means that it's possible. If we go out there, we train people who can code, people who don't have exposure. So it's just evidence that people just need the exposure. So people have the capability, they're quick. So we are humans, we have good brain capacity. So from that experience, I actually learned a lot. I started believing that 4IR is actually a possibility. South Africa should happily embrace that. our young people out there, including myself, obviously, we can promote for to the highest level possible. In a week, we managed to get up to 10 working games, which is something tremendous. It would take an IT student probably like 3 years to actually pull a actual working game. It means that, yeah, so it was a really good experience. I felt motivated. The experience why I've been working on code breakers and Enigma, even though my master and my PhD is not even on that, because I had the motivation. I feel like I have to give back. I need to keep helping the young guys out there.
Maybe at this point we can open it up for some questions from the audience if you want.
Thank you. I should stop asking questions. I've got a few concerns, or not concerns, but just questions, just with regards to what the students are developing. I mean, when you look at online games, especially EA Sports, it's worth close to, the last time I checked, 1.2 billion rand in terms of value. And EA Sport is becoming now classified as a sport. You're seeing big brands now coming in and putting in money behind this gaming world. And now, my problem is, now I've been listening, and all of the students' games have, if not have a very high cost entry or an element of data where you have to be online. How do we look at that element of accessibility towards these games? Because in listening, and most of the games that have been developed in terms of for health purposes and also to assist in learning, but we're in a country, unfortunately, where data is still an issue. We're in a country where the economy is a bit tight for me to spend 150 just on a game and download and play it on my leisure. We in a country where accessories of having a stress ball, for example, as the lady indicated earlier on, an additional stress ball, I don't know how much that will be. That's just too much for my pocket. So I was just concerned about that of how do we now start looking at the world where big gamers are coming in? I mean, I'm willing to spend 700 Rand to play FIFA at home in my comfort or just crack it. But compared to your guys' games that you are developing and are not quite accessible in that regard. Thank you.
Can I answer? Okay, thanks for your question. So, just to clarify, so it's actually low cost treatment for, in my game, for example, it's a low cost sensor compared to a Wii or, or any other interactive component, as well as at the end of the day, if a child has a difficulty or if you have an issue, you need to go and help yourself, right? So you would normally go, for example, a little child would normally go and seek occupational therapy, or an occupational therapist would have to come into the rural areas. So what these games do is break the barrier. They, like, if you incorporate 4R into that, you can have this low cost game in a creche, an occupational therapist not even in the area. So in terms of accessibility, you don't have to go and leave the area. And then just to answer your question in terms of data, so I know in my game there's code implemented that it doesn't have to be connected to the internet to play. So you can play the game. You don't have internet, cool. Then it's now, you just got paid, or the person who's running the place just got paid. Now they can afford data. As soon as you have your data, you can upload it to the cloud. So it's not necessarily reliant. It doesn't need internet. It's not on the internet to play the game. If you're with me. And then just the last point, in terms of EA games and EA Sports, you have Fortnite, which was built on Unreal Engine, right? Huge game. These games that we're creating are, I would, for lack of a better word now, they're prototypes. They're not, after I'm finished my master's, it's not going to be released. It needs to be refactored a bit, and in terms of graphics, and money will be needed, and that's when funding will come in. But if you're looking around the world, in terms of funding for these serious games, as we said, the SIGA conference, the amount of money that you can, that in Holland, these serious games, if I have time, I'll just say a quick story. So one of the games that they implemented, in order to find, so you get an AED, which is used for CPR, and what happened is they created a game where if you find an AED around Holland, you go into the app and you put your location and you put in an AED. We were able to map out the entire country AED, where every single AED is, just from a game, which would have taken, a company or someone, I don't know how many months, took the game out. I can't remember the exact time, but it was a very short period of time to map out the entire area. So it's using these serious games. You can't really compare it to a FIFA game, because FIFA game, they're gonna go and take pictures of the soccer players to try and map out how they're gonna be playing. Whereas our games we can't map out how a child is gonna interact with the game. If you know what I'm saying, it becomes therapy. Using the AI, we have to create the treatment for the child. So it's a bit different to your normal traditional games. But I do hear your question.
On a different topic, we are aware of the problem that we have with connectivity in South Africa and the data prices. And for the fourth industrial revolution to work, that is definitely something that needs to be addressed. And the more people are connected, the more we would be able to do. So separate from these programs, we also have students in electrical engineering science. And we are working with Liquid Telecom, for example, on a project in rural KZN to get broadband internet to those villages. And we'd like to expand that. And we are working on connectivity. And hopefully we can get everyone in South Africa connected cheaply so that we can actually roll this out. Any other questions?
Has your department or your group ever linked with the multimedia department? They do quite a bit of their sort of game developments and interaction design and whatnot. If it's something that you haven't yet linked, it might be an interesting collaboration.
Thank you for the suggestion. No, we have not yet, but we will. So at the moment, we're trying to get away with very minimal graphics that we can also buy online. And because usually if you do a game and you do an EI game, the graphics and things like that and the music, that will be, your whole budget will just go to that. So we are also, in a sense, it's difficult making games for kids, but it's also easier in the sense that they are more forgiving at the beginning. If you have brightly colored squares and triangles, you can already do something. The games that we do will not compete with something like Fortnite or so. And for that, we'll definitely need some extra skills to help with that.
So my observation first and then question is that it's really interdisciplinary, the stuff that you're doing, which I think is wonderful. I do, however, wonder, firstly, how do you get yourself to know enough about psychology to build a game that really addresses the issue? I mean, you said you spoke to psychometrists. Is that enough? I don't know, So before you answer that question, though, I want to just continue and say, I think, so the second part of my question would be because the post-industrial revolution, the way our Vice Chancellor speaks about it, has to do with groups, individuals, and technology and that interaction. But it also has to do with the interaction between fields, I think, as we see here, engineering and psychology or engineering and yes. So how receptive are those fields to what you're doing? That's the second part of the question.
You're absolutely right in saying that I'm not a psychologist, so I don't really know the nuances of psychology or mental health in its totality. But that's why I'm consulting psychologists on the effectiveness of the game. But that being said, there is a disclosure in my game which says that it's not here to totally replace psychotherapy or medication. So if you are an anxiety sufferer who is seeing a therapist, you should probably discuss including this game into your treatment and not just be like, okay, now I'm going to play this game and I'm completely going to stop taking my medication or seeing the psychologist completely. So it's not really, at this point, it's not really to replace the treatment, it's more to supplement it. And that being said, I think when it comes to psychology, it's a really difficult field to sort of completely comprehend. Because if you think about the available treatments, there is psychotherapy and medication and complementary treatments. And as many different sufferers that there are that many different ways to react to it. So for example, if there's two anxiety sufferers, they won't necessarily react to the same medication in exactly the same way. They won't react to complementary treatments in exactly the same way. Maybe yoga or meditation will help someone, maybe maybe it will help them 60%, but maybe for someone else it will only help them like 10%. So I think the thing about psychology is that I feel there isn't one treatment to sort of help everybody. So I do understand your concern in the sense that I'm not a specialist in psychology. That's why if I decide to take this game, maybe to release it to the public at some point, I'd have to work much more extensively with mental health professionals. And in that same regard, as part of my research, I found a lot of other games like the Nevermind game or the Sparks game, which wasn't necessarily developed by psychologists, but when they decided to test it, they had the input from psychologists and clinical trials very extensively. So I think if I ever want to actively test it and release it to the public, I'd have to obviously get ethical clearance on a very high level and incorporate a lot more of psychologists' opinion in that regard. And also with your other part of the question about the fourth industrial revolution, I think the fact that a lot of these projects are interdisciplinary shows that I think we're reaching a point as a society where not everything's just straightforward. I think everything needs to be interdisciplinary. I think if a product or a service isn't, then it's kind of going to fail. I think personally. I don't know if anyone wants to add on to that second part of the question.
Yeah, I just want to add on in our game, or the way my game was designed, was by the occupational therapist, most of it. Obviously, the developing was done by me, but the actual design, how the levels are structured, it's everything that they would do in a normal assessment or a treatment in a game now. So it was extremely. There was a lot of collaboration with an occupational therapist. Where I could use my skills, I did, and then when they used their skills, and we both would bounce off from each other. So that's just, yeah.
I think that's time for us. But thank you very much for having us, and thank you very much for the panel for coming today.
Can we please give them a round of applause for the last time? Some amazing stuff that they are doing. Kind of mind-blowing, actually. But we're nearing the end of our program with just one more speaker to go. And often when the fourth industrial revolution is concerned, we have questions with regards to safety and how all of this, ties in, or how safe it is actually to incorporate such things into our daily lives. And to elaborate more on that, we have Dr. or Mr. Richard Tlalele, who has been working in IT for 14 years and in information security for 9. With experience in both private and public sectors, he is dedicated to making staff and students aware of cyber security. So he's going to talk to us about how we unknowingly assist hackers to commit cyber crimes. Please help me welcome Mr. Richard Tlalele.
Thanks everyone for the opportunity to actually come and present. To come and present cybersecurity awareness to you guys. So, but today I'm with my two interns that are always supporting me, which is Ntate Thabo Motlamme and Ntate Edward Ditseho. I'm gonna just give them 2 minutes just to speak about something specific, and then I'll start with my presentation. Tibos, do you wanna come through? So Tibos is gonna just talk a little bit about password, ne? About credential phishing. This is gonna take about 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Richard. Okay, the topic of today is credential phishing. Credential phishing is on the rise. Attackers send phishing emails impersonating familiar brand to get information from you via email. Credential phishing nowadays, it's more advanced. People send you phishing emails impersonating other companies, and let me check something here a little bit.
So basically, credential phishing, they're trying to get your login details so that they can reuse it at a later stage. So basically, the aim here, they will impersonate any other company that is legitimate. And then after they get your credentials, then they can start to create other further attacks. They can send emails within your organization to try and get more credentials, or they can actually try and install malware or try and disrupt services in any other way. Okay, so that was in Ntate Tiwos Mtlamme.
Okay.
Thanks for the small presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so while Eddie is coming, the sequence of my presentation, I'll try and talk about the 4 IR stuff first, then go into what we call phishing in a little bit more detail, and then from there, just advices as to how you should handle cybersecurity threats. Okay, Eddie.
Evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Richard. Okay, I'll take from where Thabo left, actually. But for me, I was going to talk about smishing attacks, which is the latest trend that they use instead of using the emailing one. So before that, I would like to explain what this smishing actually is, what this smishing is actually. Smishing, it's a form of phishing that they usually use normally, but this one, they do it in the form of texting. They send text messages in a way that they want to extract personal information from you, or personal information, like I said, or they'll send links on it whereby when you click on the link, it will request you to log in using your personal credentials, as much as I said. On that, they will be actually trying to get into by so doing, they will be trying to compromise the environment as a whole, because once they have your information, basically, they will come after the other ones. So what I'm trying to say here is, if you are an individual and then you provide your workplace information, by so doing, you'll be compromising the entire environment. And then here, there are tips that you can actually use in order to protect yourself against such things. So I'm actually going to highlight 3 again. What you need to do first, when you receive an SMS, like I said, that you don't recognize the user or you don't recognize the link, don't jump into responding to it or clicking on it. The first thing that you can do is to check that link on internet for further information about it. Or you can search the entire phone number to see if there's been reported as a scam. Normally, if that thing has once happened, when you search it, then you'll get the entire information about it, because basically some people has already experienced it. I believe so. Or you can block the sender for further communication. I thank you.
Okay, thanks, Eddie. All right, so those are my 2 interns. We believe in handing over the baton to them so that they know they are exposed to speaking about cybersecurity issues, because these are the guys that are actually all the time assisting me with cybersecurity issues in UJ. So with that said, with my awareness topic today, that's me in brief and my contact details. And then I'm gonna talk a bit about the fourth industrial revolution, specifically the smart fridge. Because back in the days, an ace gas or a fridge is a fridge, but lately we see that there's so many features involved. Now you can be at the shops and decide that, oh, I need to fill up my fridge. So with the latest technologies, you can just on your phone see what's inside your fridge and be able to purchase whatever you need to purchase from shops. And also, you also get to, if maybe your wife is cooking in the kitchen, you get to send them a text or send them a message. They can be able to look at the fridge and be able to see the message. The other thing that I liked about this, you can also incorporate cameras. So this is a Samsung fridge. Right? This is a Samsung fridge. You can also incorporate cameras to see who's actually at the door. And if maybe you're watching soccer or rugby with your friends and you really don't want to lose focus of the game, you can do a screen mirroring, go into your kitchen and be able to see your video or your movies right from the door of your fridge. So fourth industrial revolution is here, but it also comes with some security vulnerabilities. Because of now, we'll have to talk about how our fridge is being hacked, which is a concept that we are not familiar with currently. But because of the Internet of Things, we would need to research further there and find out how can we protect the people from such. The next one is smart cities in China, where they're using facial recognition. So basically here, they're trying to see if maybe missing people are in the population, fugitives, and criminals. So with the technologies that they're using down there, they are able to control the environment and actually protect people from being attacked, from pickpocketing and stuff like that. But then it might come up with an issue of, do we let people know when we record them? It might come with some privacy issues. But those are things that we need to research at the security industry. The next one, I don't like it much, but I need to talk about it as well. So this one is what we call a smart condom. I don't know what influenced this one to be actually researched and to be actually put into the market. So with this one specifically, it's able to time the duration of the sessions, the thrusts and stuff like that. But when it comes to cybersecurity issues, I mean, some of these condoms, they actually can tell if maybe a person has an STI and stuff like that. So I don't know, from a security perspective, would I want maybe another person to have information about my STIs? I don't know about that. Or whether I would like people to know as to how long I last. But those are the improvements that takes us to the fourth industrial revolution. Okay, we've also seen our president using the hologram. He actually addressed the Digital Economy Summit in Midrand while he was still in Rustenburg. So we can see that we're actually progressing. But then the security issues around this, we don't know them as yet, but it's an area that needs to be properly investigated. So with that said, I'm gonna ask every one of you to stand up. And then just look at the screen. Choose a card. Don't tell anybody next to you. Choose a card. Okay? I'll try and remove the card from the deck, and I'm going to do that just now. If I've removed your card, I would like you to sit down. Okay? Okay, so which means you didn't choose a card, I'm assuming. And it's still there. It's impossible. Okay, so let me explain. You guys can sit down. So these are all the tricks that the people are trying to use against you. And that's why my topic for today is that you guys are assisting them. But because of, I said you must choose, and then I changed the thing. So it was a short space of time. I forced you to actually choose. And I actually used a different set of cards. But now the focus was on you to pick a card, not to see what other cards are there. And this is the first set of cards that I've actually showed to you guys. The second card, this is totally different cards, set of cards from the ones that I've done previously. So that's why I'm saying the gentleman and the lady, which means they didn't choose or they didn't have enough time to actually do that. So basically, such techniques is what the phishers and cyber attackers are using out there. It's no longer only about technology, the vulnerabilities in the technology. It's also about what we call social engineering. So the psychological part of things, the marketing of things, and how we behave as humans. So what happens here is misdirection and attention. Your attention was on picking a card, but I know in the background that I was swapping all the cards, putting up a different set of cards there. So with phishing, then, like Tibos and Eddie explained, these guys, they're actually trying to extract stuff from you. So they try to move your attention to one thing. So if they send an email, they'll try to push the fact that maybe you need to do this urgently. And once you see that maybe your account is going to be locked, or you need to reset your password now, or you are not going to be able to work, you don't check the other stuff that's actually included into the email. And you rush into clicking a link and actually providing credentials. But if you, maybe, as an example, I've put an example of a phishing email there. If you take your time and you check thoroughly, for example, on this email, if you see this Remy Hitch, it's actually a mortuary in the US. And if you know that, okay, this email was a bit funny because they are trying to get people to pay about $300 US, stating that people were playing with themselves. They have the pictures and they're gonna embarrass them by sending the pictures to friends, colleagues, and everyone else. But if you know that you're not doing such things, then you know that this is just a fallacy. This doesn't really exist, okay? And you're not gonna rush into paying a ransom. Even if you were doing whatever they say you were doing from the email, you still needed to check. Why would a mortuary then try and track you, take pictures of you, and try and embarrass you in front of your friends by sending those naked pictures of yourself? So basically, what I'm trying to explain here is that as soon as it sounds urgent, just pull back a bit and try and check where is it coming from, where the link is actually leading to, and if whether the information contained in an email or in an SMS is actually legitimate. So here, this next slide talks about the mobile devices that we're using, that now we can actually get our emails on our mobile phones, and it can be a platform that can be used by attackers. Then the next one that I will talk about then is the application permissions, because we normally go into Google Play and those stores to download, and we hardly ever check the permissions. And it is one thing that we should be able to do all the time, because that's where the trick is. So if we look at both the application permissions there on the FM radio tuner and on the Talking Tom, we see that the permissions that we give into the Talking Tom is actually to delete the contents of your SD card and also to read it. And then if we go down there on the others, we see that it's gonna prevent the phone from sleeping, which I understand, because if you're playing with the phone, you don't want it to go on sleeping mode. But I don't understand why the Google Play billing service is actually there, and why would it wanna view the network connections. The next one, which is a radio, I also don't understand why would an application then try and find which accounts are on the phone, because I mean it's just a radio. You should be able to tune into a frequency and listen to the radio. But with this one, it finds accounts, and it also views the network connections. So we just need to be extra careful when we're dealing with application that we're downloading from Google Play or from the Google stores. So the Nokia 3310 that I've put there, in my perception, I think it was safe because we couldn't download. We're just receiving email, not emails, SMSs, and you could just do a phone call, nothing else. And the battery used to last for at least 3-4 days. But with the phones that we have now, that's not feasible. So some of the advices that I've actually listed there is that just make sure that on your smartphones you install your antiviruses. Make sure that your phone is locked with a passcode, or at least there's a pattern. In case your phone gets stolen, make sure that you also register to track your phone and also to be able to automatically wipe it in case that you can't find it. And then only install applications from trusted sources. So try and stay away from those applications that are free. I know some of them come in handy, but you don't know what else are you getting with that free application. And then try and avoid to use your smartphone to actually enter sensitive information on the websites. So I talked about downloading of free apps. And then the other thing is using the internet to actually purchase stuff, maybe on Takealot and Gumtrees and stuff like that. Because of this one talks about the card not present. Because once you open up your internet site, you are able to purchase without actually having the physical card. So long as you have the CVV number, you have the card number, you have the expiry date and the name of the card, they can do transactions on behalf of you because they have those details. So just make sure that even if the website asks you to save, don't save. Do the transaction, but don't save your credentials on the Google platforms. Okay, so the next one I was gonna talk more about the dating and romance scam. If you guys are familiar with the show called Catfish, we normally see people being scammed there. Hey, I love you. And then from there, the relationship goes for about 3 months or so. Then from there, they start asking for money. And only to find out it's not even the person that's on the picture that you actually fall in love with. Okay. So password protection, that I'm gonna skip, Tabo has spoken about. So sharing of passwords. I believe that we should treat our passwords as our toothbrushes, because it doesn't matter if whether we're married or not, we don't share our toothbrushes with anyone else, even though we love them. So passwords should be the same, because if they get into your work email or whatever account that you have, they can send emails as if it's you, okay? And now to prove what we call non-repudiation, to prove that it was not you, it becomes a little bit difficult. And those that are in relationships, I mean, it's not a bad thing to tell a person that you don't want to share your password, and it doesn't mean we love them any less. The reality is people take pictures, others they post them on social medias, other information is not supposed to be known by other people, and if the relationship goes sour, they might expose that. You don't want that. And there is also a trend that I see of people writing passwords on sticky notes and little bits of papers underneath the keyboard and stuff like that. Because if they leave the keyboard, they find the password, they will be able to log in. And we don't want that to happen. And eventually you become accountable. You are the accountable person. So with the next slide, then I'm talking about credential reuse. So this happens when you use one password on multiple platforms. You use the same password for your LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and all of those. But if that one password is compromised, the attackers knows that people are that lazy. If they have one of your passwords, they will try it on all the other platforms. So the best way is to actually try and have one password for each platform. I know it's a little bit tedious work, but it's safer that way. All right. So when you're using other people's phones or laptops, almost you get this pop-up when you log in into your emails and stuff, where they actually ask you to save your password. If it's not your own device, don't. Because once you give that person his device back, they can actually go into your emails or whatever account that you've logged in with. Even if it is your own personal device, if you share it with other people, they will be able to log in into your account. So the next one is something just to ponder on, especially when a person knows your pattern to log into your phone or your password. Because it does not only mean that they can get access to your phone only. It actually means all the passwords that you've saved for all the sites that you've accessed via Google, the person can get to those. So your Facebook, your LinkedIn, whatever, once they have that, for them, they just need to follow the steps and actually go into the other passwords. All right. So this I've talked about, but I just need to reiterate. I hope I'm still doing good with time there, because I think this is my last slide. So if you have a device, just allow your security software to update. If it is Microsoft or your Mac, make sure that you get your regular updates. And then don't click on attachment or links unless you can verify the source, because of this might be an attack. And then ensure that your system is patched all the time. Also stop downloading pirated softwares and movies and stuff, because most of the time they are seeded with spyware and malware. So you don't want that. So the next one is people calling you and confirming your information. So people will also call you and tell you that they're from this company, maybe from Vodacom or whatever, and then they want to confirm the information. But they have a tendency of asking you to provide you a full ID number. So if they are confirming, rather stick to using half of your ID number, either the beginning or the last number. They must also confirm what they have, because most of the time they are taking chances. They need that information, and then later in life you find out there's a car that has been bought, or a house, or something, and now even your record now is messed up. People start to blacklist you and stuff like that, and it's because of you've answered the call and you've provided ID numbers then. And then if it sounds too good to be true, whether they tell you you've won a UK lottery that you've never played, don't fall for it, because of nothing like that exists. And then when it comes to data, back up onto the cloud, back up onto your phone, and have an external hard drive to make sure if you lose or one of them gets corrupt, at least you have a backup that you can fall back to. So with that said, I would like to thank you guys. I think I'm ready to take any questions that you guys might have. I guess no questions. Okay. All right, so let me take the gentleman here and then the one at the back. Some regulations that ITSS. Once you've given it to them. So they are bound by that to actually protect you from that thing. But let's say it's a scammer that you don't know, then you're not going to be able to tell. Yep. Okay, gentleman at the back. So there's two questions there. So the first one, it was about the cookies. So there's the GDPR that was passed that forced everybody that has a website to actually tell the people that my website is using cookies. That's why if you were a lady, if you liked shopping for shoes and you went into a specific site, the next time you visit the site, it will take you to where the shoes are because of the preferences that they've set into the system. So those are cookies because it keeps that information, and next time when you go to the particular site, it checks what your preferences were, and then from that point, then try and gives you what you need to see. So there is a regulation that forces companies and people that are hosting websites to use cookies. So it's actually a good thing because of you go into a site and you know that it has cookies. So back in the days, the cookies used to contain password information and user credentials. So now that we've done away, most of the companies have done away with that. Most of the time it keeps preferences and regional settings and stuff like that. And then your second question was around the Wi-Fi at the malls or your free Wi-Fis. So normally if it doesn't have a little log, you know, almost that Wi-Fi side, if it doesn't have a little log, then you know it's not secure. You can connect, but your information, if anybody can connect into the same network and sniff, they will be able to see your information. That's traveling to the internet or to wherever you connect. So just check if it has a log. If it has a log, then surely it will want a username and a password that maybe the organization will provide. Then you can use that. But most of the time, if it is free, but it doesn't have a log, try and stay away from it. But me personally, as a security person, I don't connect to any of those. Yeah. Okay, thanks a lot, guys.
Can we please give Mr. Richard a round of applause? Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of today's program. I would just like to make you aware of the fact that we will be back again tomorrow, but if you are not attending, can I please ask that you complete the evaluation form via this QR code? There is one on each table. We would just really appreciate and love your feedback with regards to how you experienced today and maybe what we can do better and how, what we can do moving forward. All right, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. And I think we're leaving having learned a lot about the fourth industrial revolution and how we can better equip ourselves moving forward and how to better prepare for IR. Thank you so much for coming.